The sword swung up, splashing the liquid high and causing a few leaves to fall beside the sharp blade. The young man struck down at the wolf once more. The enormous wolf in pain opened its mouth full of sharp fangs and let out a heartbreaking cry after feeling its flesh being grazed by the sword. After defeating the wolf, the brave young man turned to face an eagle. The eagle was several times larger than him. Standing before the sharp claws rushing to attack, he remained calm and did not move at all. He merely glanced at it with a look of disdain, revealing no trace of worry in his eyes. Not giving the eagle a chance to approach him, he suddenly crouched down and swiftly swung his sword along its body. With just one strike, the eagle was nearly defeated, only able to slightly open its sharp beak and screech. As the eagle fell, the young man stood up, swung his sword to the side, and flicked away the clotted blood that remained on the blade from the beasts he had just slain lying scattered on the cold ground. However, there was still one creature left that had not been completely defeated. It looked at the young man with eyes filled with terror. Suddenly, it gasped for breath on the ground and could only say a few words. "You have defeated so many demons by yourself." Its voice still echoed weakly. The immortal crow Raven Vault, from the cold ground, struggled to look up at the boy. The towering figure of Raven stood tall with a gleaming sword. His entire form seemed to radiate light. The voice of the beast had not yet completely faded. The formidable guardian of evil. In response to the beast's faint voice was the cold face of Raven. His gaze contained a vague irritation, along with various long and short scars, making him seem truly unapproachable now. The sword was swung once more, the swift movement creating a rush of air that wrapped around the blade as it ascended simultaneously. The beast was taken by surprise by Raven's attack, its eyes narrowing, no longer able to retaliate. It lay still, resigned to receive Raven's strike. Warm, fresh blood splattered everywhere the moment Raven brought down his sword. Raven let out a quiet sigh after dealing with the loquacious creature that had annoyed him. Beneath the bright full moon, the gentle light illuminated Raven, making his silhouette appear very serene. Gazing at the beautiful scenery while feeling a heavy discomfort in his heart, Raven murmured, "I have come this far." Looking up at the moonlight, his face marked by scarred contours and his eyes filled with sorrow, he let out a gentle sigh. In his breath lingered a few tiny hopes. Only 15 days left. If he could survive, he would finally regain his freedom. Like a vow under the moon, Raven spoke, "I will surely escape from here." His weary legs that had been dragging suddenly came to a halt. In front of him stood the demon's camp. White tents of various sizes were set up in the midst of the lush green grass. Even though it was shrouded in darkness, they were easily recognizable under the moonlight. In the middle of the road, a few people were chatting, while others quietly walked along. On the wooden benches erected beside the roadside sat two drunken men not shy about exposing their upper bodies. They were no different from a couple of exhibitionists drenched in alcohol, lost to the amusements of their own world. In stark contrast to their blissful revelry was the suffering and emaciation of the prisoners or slaves who had lost all vitality. Some sat weary on wooden barrels, while others were completely depleted of strength, hugging their knees and resting their heads against the barrels, utterly exhausted. Looking at the scene before him, Raven couldn't help but think, if he looked back at the past 10 years, those days truly were hell. The Demon Legion, that was where those with extremely savage appearances were gathered. Some wore spiked armor and carried weapons that were a mix of axes and holy lances. Some had a long scar running from their forehead through their left eye, stretching down to the corner of their mouth. Others bore no scars but wore two-horned helmets and carried long spears. And among them was Raven. Those brought here were fated to fight the demons in a never-ending struggle for power. This was also the most brutal treatment one could receive in this kingdom. Almost all were criminals or slaves. Raven only needed to take a few steps, but the different fates became clear within the space he walked through. Some were shackled with haggard faces. Others were drinking, laughing freely. The worst of the worst, these people didn't care about their own lives or whether they would live to see another day. Raven quietly walked past the white tents, but the Eidolons didn't let him be. With nothing to do, they could sit sipping their drinks and discussing anything that came within their gossiping range. As soon as they saw Raven's figure glide past, they quickly voiced their thoughts. "Hey, look, it seems that bastard Raven has killed all of his subordinates and is back all alone." Even though he was once a royal member, he still seems tough. Raven paid little attention to the gossip around him. No matter what people said, his face remained cold and emotionless, as if those emotions did not belong to him. He wanted to stay silent and go rest. He tried to ignore the idle people looking for trouble with him, but perhaps because he had been kind, he ran into a big, bald guy looking to start a fight. The man blocked his path and playfully said, "Let's see what we have here." He wasn't wearing a shirt, just a piece of cloth covering one shoulder, with a strap across it to keep it in place. He placed his hands on his hips, burning a teasing smile directed at Raven. Behind him were two servants, one blonde and one bald. Both had equally rough faces. The leader clearly enjoyed bothering Raven. He took advantage of his sides, looking down at Raven and said, "Are you ignoring me again? Do you have anything to state at me?" People who don't know how to enjoy life just look for reasons to cause trouble. Raven couldn't hold back anymore. He clicked his tongue in annoyance, showing disinterest in them. Raven looked up, his eyes filled with utter disdain. His face lost all patience as he coldly said, "It seems you want to die, huh?" The big guy was quite irritated. He didn't expect Raven to dare speak to him in that arrogant tone. Grimacing, he intended to say something more, but before he could finish his sentence, his large belly was immediately struck by a knee from Raven. The powerful kick, without any hesitation, left him in excruciating pain. Unable to endure it, he vomited violently, white foam spilling out, his eyes rolling back. Not giving them a chance to retaliate, Raven quickly placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. Moments later, he drew the sword and deftly pointed it at the throat of the minion next to the fat guy, rendering him unable to act recklessly, his mouth agape in shock. The sharp blade lightly grazed his neck, already drawing blood. Next, Raven moved closer to the bald guy, resting the sword on his shoulder and extended one hand towards him. Out of fear, he instinctively raised both hands to protect himself, letting out a soft cry. "Ugh." Raven's hand gently placed itself on his white, fear-stricken face, with a few tears still lingering in the corners of his eyes. Before he could beg for mercy, Raven forcefully pushed his head down to the ground. The stone floor shattered, sending debris flying everywhere. Raven stood confidently with his sword, looking down at the arrogant ones he had personally brought low. The leader was furious but could do nothing. He could only kneel before Raven and curse, "You bastard." Next to him lay his unconscious henchman, who had been knocked out by the violent impact. His face was still pale. Raven's sword hovered just above the leader's face, causing him to flinch, his brows furrowing tightly. Raven cruelly narrowed his eyes at him and warned, "If you want to die before the demons devour you, you can always rely on me." Having completed his task, Raven calmly turned away as if nothing had happened, leaving the man still kneeling on the ground. He was defiant and angrily threatened. "Damn it, I'll remember this." A fallen former royal, it was said that he would not survive a year, but I had become a monster capable of surviving 10 years in this legion. Raven walked alone toward the white tent set up among the troops. At the top of the tent was a flag raised. Raven's thoughts continued, "The lies about me have been spread back and forth by friends, but those words are completely accurate. The Velt clan, although not a prestigious or famous family, my clan truly existed in the royal court. Even as just a shadow, Raven still exuded nobility draped in royal garments. The place he stood was magnificent and splendid, with exquisite carvings that were gilded. But then everything collapsed, and we lost everything. As he recalled that sorrowful memory, Raven's face bore a distinct sadness, albeit only briefly visible, in the depths of his eyes. Images from long ago gradually appeared. No matter what, he could never forget that day, the day he was chained like a dog. At that moment, he could do nothing but reveal his horror with eyes full of helplessness. About 10 years ago, the Velt family mansion burned fiercely, impossible to extinguish. The flames rose to the sky like a torch lighting up the quiet night. Inside and out, the mansion was engulfed in fire, leaving no place untouched. A strange man with long hair tied neatly at the back stood with his arms outstretched, gleefully watching the mansion being consumed by flames with no chance of rescue. He spoke with disdain, "You foolish members of the Velt family. You conspire to rise against the royal family with such stupid actions. Do you not deserve the death penalty?" Raven, hearing the unfounded accusations, could only scream in despair. "You are wrong." Around his neck was a heavy collar with a thick chain, like a disobedient dog chained up for its master to teach as they please. Raven's hands were also bound behind him. He could do nothing but shout, trying to clear his family's name. "Our family would never do such things." The strange man looked at Raven with mockery before saying, "You are truly a fool who does not recognize your own mistakes." Furious, Raven could only yell, still bound by the thick chain around his neck. "It's all a misunderstanding. The other families are the ones plotting everything. We were just pulled into this." The man's hand grasped Raven's head, forcing him to look up at him. Raven's face was contorted in pain. Behind them, the mansion was still fiercely ablaze. Raven was completely at their mercy, unable to do anything. Seeing his pitiful state, the man spoke with delight. "Both your father and mother have been eliminated. Why shouldn't I turn you to ashes along with these rooms?" It seemed he had already planned everything out, as he spoke again, pretending to grant Raven a great favor. "But I will give you another choice." Raven's face was one of deep discomfort. He clenched his teeth, looking at the man before him with eyes full of hatred and defiance. He had no intention of letting Raven go. The man grabbed Raven's hair, pulling him closer, regardless of whether he resisted or not. His voice was sinister as he proclaimed, Fight against the demons in their army for 10 years. The man's grip tightened, leaving Raven horrified at the conditions for his survival. In pain, Raven furrowed his brow and let out a faint groan. The man solemnly continued, "If you do that, at least I will allow you to live." While Raven was feeling frustrated at being treated like nothing more than an animal, the nobles outside began to murmur among themselves. "Oh my, a legion of demons?" Their faces lacked clear expressions, but the upturned corners of their mouths in delight were easily visible. The chatter was loud enough for Raven to hear. Even now, he couldn't forget their words. Isn't that the worst royal legion? The place filled with nothing but savages and criminals. To be pushed to that point as royalty. This must be the end of the Valt clan. The back and forth continued animatedly outside. Raven endured it all, gritting his teeth and only hearing the sound of gulping. Gulp calmly turned away, showing no concern or intent to linger a moment longer with Raven, who was being restrained. He waved his hand dismissively and said scornfully, "If you can, then you will be free to do as you wish." With a desire to live, Raven barely opened his mouth and replied nonchalantly, "I understand." The two soldiers then released Raven. He stumbled, dropping to his knees. His eyes painfully gazed at his mansion, which was being burned down piece by piece right before him. His voice sounded determined. It must be so. Lost in a stream of memories, he finally reached the white tent. Raven's hand lightly touched the fabric of the tent's door. He pondered, speaking to himself. The days of living in shame will come to an end soon. His eyes gently closed, allowing the scar that stretched across his eye to align. Raven recalled everything that had happened to him over the past 10 years. Since the day I was dragged here, I have fought against monsters without any training or experience. Raven gradually became accustomed to using his sword to slay the demons, but he had managed to survive until now. Raven still struggled to keep his life intact from day to day by striving to improve his skills. The young man's face showed no scars, though dirty, it still could not hide his gentle demeanor. Raven reminisced about the days gone by. I was just a child. Back then, I was the young master of a noble family. Clean from head to toe, untouched by earthly dust, my youthful face always smiled at the world. Time never spares anyone. Becoming a member of the demon-slaying legion for 10 years has left Raven's face covered in scars, along with a cold, ruthless demeanor shaped by countless hardships. Ending the line of recollection, Raven's eyes revealed a sense of silence. Standing in front of the tent, he calmly spoke. The next large-scale demon extermination will be our final battle. Raven's silhouette stepped into the tent, a place filled with aspirations and hopes. His voice had not yet faded. There is only one step left before we are free and can restore our clan. Meanwhile, in the territory of the Pendragon clan in the Ancona forest, a stunning pink and purple sky enveloped the majestic mountainside. A gaze of fear and worry emerged along with the forest. Those eyes trembled from something that seemed very terrifying. Under the night sky bathed in pink and purple light, a moon also shone with an enchanting purple glow. The owner of those eyes had golden hair. Facing him was a perfect white dragon from head to tail. Its armor on the horns and chest gleamed under the hazy moonlight. It stood before the young man and softly spoke. "Oh, White Knight, time to fulfill our oath is drawing near." The young boy, with an innocent face, looked up at the dragon with a worried expression, one hand raised to shield his eyes from the light emanating from the dragon. A dragon, a being more powerful than any type of monster, is perhaps the strongest creature ever to have set foot on Earth. Only one family could be subordinate to such a beast, the Pendragon Duke family. The massive dragon obediently bowed its head to the person with golden hair. Thanks to their ability to tame dragons, they held great influence in the kingdom and were also one of the most prestigious families. There were just 13 days left until Raven Vault was to be pardoned. In the command tent of the demon camp, the solitary figure of Raven approached. He raised his hand to pull aside the fabric at the tent's entrance and quickly stepped inside. Raven coldly announced, "I have returned." Inside was a stout man with a scruffy beard and a bald head. One hand he used to fondle the unfortunate slave comfortably. The slave could do nothing but obey. With the other hand, he tore into a piece of meat he was holding. Next to him was another slave being commanded, holding a bottle of wine. This was Commander Baltai. He had no intention of stopping his eating to have a proper conversation with Raven. He spoke, a piece of meat still in his mouth. "It seems you have returned alone again, the Grim Reaper Raven Vault. What about the reconnaissance mission report?" Raven remained silent, his brow slightly furrowed at the man's rude behavior, his gaze exuding coldness. However, he quickly brushed it off, as such behavior was quite normal here. Raven calmly reported, "The number of demons on the front line is very large. If they encounter the main army, our chances of winning are almost non-existent." Baltai, with a beard full of bits of half-eaten meat, mockingly asked Raven, "Hovo, so you're saying you can't win against them?" After saying this, he let out a puff of breath. Raven said nothing, merely looking at him in silence. Essentially, he didn't care about Baltainen's contemptuous attitude or the mockery in his words. The man wore a twisted smile and spoke incomprehensibly. If it were just us, we would definitely lose. Baltainen seemed confident as he spoke, but it appeared that tomorrow, the Pendragon clan would come to our aid. Upon hearing this, Raven's face showed no emotion, but his eyebrows slightly knitted together as he looked at the man's sinister smile. Baltainen continued to speak with an air of self-satisfaction. Moreover, it seems they are bringing the most powerful creature. Baltainen's words seemed to freeze everything. They brought along a dragon. At that moment, not far away, a large tent had been set up for some time, adorned with the symbol of House Pendragon, which was the powerful dragon. Raven frowned and questioned him with a tone of skepticism. What? Are you saying that mysterious creature will fight alongside us? He surely knew that what he said was impossible, so he tried to appear determined as he looked at Raven and clarified the information. I know it sounds hard to believe, but it seems that the Pendragon family has tamed them for generations. The white dragon will fight the demons for us. Raven's expression showed some discomfort at the mention of the Pendragon dukedom. His past, though not as the child of a powerful family, was at least tied to a royal lineage. The disdain from 10 years ago resurfaced, making him sensitive to the esteemed families of the royal court. Doubts lingered in Raven's mind. They were one of the most influential families in the kingdom, and royal blood flowed through their veins. I don't know if that's true or not. I thought it was just a legend. Who would have the honor of having a dragon serve them? Raven raised his hand to his chin, deep in thought. I have spent 10 years of my life fighting demons, but I have never seen a dragon. I didn't think Baltainen would believe in such fairy tale things. Has he gone mad? Moreover, his train of thought momentarily faltered. As if remembering something, Raven lifted his face, his hand leaving his chin. I heard that the predecessor of this family had died, and because of that, they have also lost some influence over the years. After a moment of deep thought, Raven looked up with a weary expression and said, I can't believe this information. Baltainen arrogantly pointed at Raven and issued a command. You have no right to say no. This is an order. But tomorrow you don't need to go to battle. Looking at the finger pointing at him, Raven's face could no longer maintain its calmness and instead showed a scowl. He exclaimed, What the hell? Baltainen remained haughty, leaning back in his chair, his fingers still pointing directly at Raven. He spoke. Since we have a dragon, we just need to leave all the monsters to it. Am I clever or not? Even so, you have to take care of the Pendragon boy. Raven's face relaxed a bit after hearing that. He agreed, say, if that's the case, then it's fine. Seeing Raven agree, Baltainen smiled slyly and added, never be far from him. Raven felt a bit suspicious, but he still compromised with him by saying, understood. Although he still had doubts, he couldn't disobey orders and reluctantly said, I will do as you say. Baltainen was overjoyed to hear Raven's agreement, grinning widely with excitement. Then Baltainen spoke. Good. Now go introduce yourself to the future count. Tomorrow, I count on you. Let's continue this banquet. Bring the wine here. Raven left the noisy tent and quickly moved to the large tent bearing the Pendragon family crest. The Pendragon banner waved high above. Raven couldn't hide his anxiety as he stared up at the flag, wondering, he really is coming. I don't understand why the royal family would trouble themselves to come to such a dump to help us. Raven recalled Baltainen's words and thought carefully. Baltainen called him a little brat who had to wipe the ass of a spoiled kid. Thinking too much made him tired. Raven put one hand behind his head and spoke resignedly. Whatever, whether we win or lose tomorrow, as long as we survive, I will definitely be free. Being a warrior unafraid of bloodshed, this simple matter gave Raven a certain confidence. Steeling himself, Raven reached out to touch the tent. Perhaps that's the way it is. With a frustrated face, Raven lifted the fabric at the entrance and stepped inside, greeting, Sorry for the intrusion, young master. In response, a voice came from inside the tent. Who are you? As soon as the words were spoken, Raven's face suddenly froze. He couldn't believe it, his eyes wide open upon hearing that voice. Raven quickly regained his composure, but his face still showed doubt. He thought to himself, what kind of voice is this? It doesn't sound human at all. Taking a deep breath to calm himself, after regaining his emotions, Raven immediately knelt down in reverence with an extremely sincere apology. I apologize for intruding without prior notice. May I have the honor to speak with the young master of the Pendragon family? Inside the tent, that voice rang out once more. In fact, I am a member of the Pendragon clan. Now, state your name and position. Raven respectfully knelt in front of the room set up within the large tent. A bit of light filtered out from the room. Along with that, Raven was introducing himself. Commander of the 12th Demon Legion, I am called Raven Vault. I have been ordered to protect the young master in tomorrow's battle, so I came to inform you. The voice inside rang out again, seemingly unconcerned about Raven being his protector. Not necessary, just be ready for tomorrow. Go rest. Raven pondered, remaining silent in his kneeling position with his head bowed. It felt like the person outside had not yet left. The voice rang out to gently urge him. Do you have anything else to say? Raven then voiced his doubts. Is it possible that you are not bringing the Divine Dragon, young master? The firepower of the Divine Dragon is essential for tomorrow's battle. The rule resonated with a calm voice, soothing Raven. Stay calm. The Divine Dragon will certainly be there to assist tomorrow. Now, please leave. Hearing the desired response, Raven had no intention of staying long, so he bowed his head. I understand. The tedious conversation ended just like that. The tent was eerily quiet, only the silhouette of Raven stepping outside remained. Even though the conversation had ended, he couldn't help but feel skeptical. Lifting the cloth aside, Raven turned his head back, looking at the place he had just left with confusion. The more he thought about it, the more puzzling it became. Was he really just a kid? That unnatural calmness, being a member of the Duke's family, coming alone to a place like this was something he had never heard of. After thinking for a moment, although his gaze still shone with doubt, Raven brushed to the side. But it didn't matter much. Raven stepped out of Pendragon's tent with his usual nonchalance. After all, he wouldn't see him again after tomorrow. The next morning, on a beautiful sunny day, Baltai and the entire Demon Legion gathered in front of Pendragon's unusually large tent. After all preparations of the Demon Legion were complete, Baltai looked up at the massive tent. He cleared his throat, his voice filled with the scent of beer, and solemnly declared, the young master of Pendragon is about to appear. In response to the fervor of Baltai, there was a motionless tent. Not a single voice replied to him. Baltai seemed to lose his patience, his face frowning as he clicked his tongue several times. Raven felt increasingly curious and looked towards the large tent. Baltai gradually lost his patience, and he stopped using honorifics, calling out directly with an increasing volume. Pendragon! Before he could finish calling that powerful name, a loud explosion occurred right in front of Baltai. The explosion was so immense that it seemed like a whirlwind, rather than just a regular blast. Raven was not much better off. The strong force of the explosion forced him to cover his face from the thick dust. Raven thought to himself, what the hell? Suddenly, amidst the thick dust, a gigantic, beautiful blue eye appeared. Raven immediately looked up, his eyes filled with a hint of fear. That is, appearing in the blue sky was the head of a dragon with a brilliant golden armor glimmering in the blazing sunlight. A white dragon revealed itself to the gaze of Baltai and Raven. Its body was covered in silver armor, and it had 3 golden horns on its head as a confirmation of its authority. Its powerful wings were gently bringing its body down to the ground. Right after landing, its calm blue eyes were not looking around, just standing still. It exuded an unapproachable aura. Raven looked up at the dragon with an incredulous expression and wide eyes. A hesitant voice rang out, White Dragon. A figure with golden hair appeared. It was easy to see that the armor of the dragon and the young man were designed similarly, like a perfect pair, shining silver white under the sunlight. The man's helmet was designed with a silver dragon that resembled the white dragon, and the helmet obscured the man's face. Meanwhile, Raven frowned slightly, trying to gaze intently at the person standing under the protection of the dragon. He was very curious about the face hidden behind the helmet. The man raised his hand and lightly touched the helmet, introducing himself. I am Eren Pendragon. Under the protection of the helmet was a young man with distinctive hair and bright blue eyes. Although he looked quite young at first glance, he boldly declared, Then let's not waste any more time. Let's begin our conquest of these monsters. According to the Demon Legion, the large-scale purge of monsters will receive support from the Pendragon clan along with assistance from the White Dragon. The monsters will be annihilated in the blink of an eye. On the demon-slaying front, the hungry gazes of the wolves were glaring at them. Raven was on his assigned mission to protect Eren. Young master, I am not accustomed to fighting while protecting someone else. Raven stood in front of Eren, raising his hand to shield him from the pack of growling wolves before them. Fulfilling his duty, he reminded, so please try to limit your movements. Raven slowly drew his sword from its sheath, then told himself, while the White Dragon takes care of the monsters in the sky, I will handle the ones here myself. His confident demeanor and the act of raising his sword indicated that Raven was fully prepared to take the lives of those aggressive beasts. He smirked and challenged them, Come on, you dogs! The wolves seemed to understand, instantly feeling provoked. They charged at him, baring their sharp teeth and growling menacingly at Raven. He didn't even give their threatening actions a second thought as he charged towards the wolves. Raven, with the glittering sword now stained with the warm blood of the wolves he had just slain, stood resolute. His sharp, cold gaze, paired with the bloody sword, sent chills down one's spine. He slashed the sword through the air several times to flick off the droplets of blood clinging to it. Having completed his mission, Raven calmly slung the sword over his shoulder and looked up towards the White Dragon soaring in the unusually purple and orange sky. The White Dragon majestically glided across the sky, gazing at the distant ruins engulfed in a haze of dust and smoke. Seemingly having spotted its target, its eyes sparkled, and it opened its mouth wide, within which a blue orb began to form. As a flock of birds and beasts approached to attack the white dragon, it immediately unleashed a torrent of blue flames from its maw, incinerating the entire flock hovering in front of it. Beneath, the ground was littered with the charred remains from earlier. The blue flames blazed from the sky down to the earth, annihilating all the demon beasts. The birds and beasts that had just intended to attack the white dragon were now singed and unable to maintain their balance, plummeting to the ground with cries of pain. The white dragon continues to breathe fire everywhere with great might. Its flames consume all surrounding creatures that cannot escape. What a powerful scene. Raven looks up at the white dragon fighting with absolute strength, unable to help but exclaim, "How terrifying." Looking at a land illuminated by the blue flames, Raven carries his sword on one shoulder, resting one hand on his hip, and calmly gazes intently at the terrifying power. He speaks to Eren, who has a cold expression and stands behind him. Who would have thought the white dragon actually exists? Raven turns to look at Eren, who has remained silent since introducing himself until now. He continues to try to make conversation. No matter what kind of monster it is, it can never compare to a dragon. I once said it was just a rumor, but it seems this is indeed true. There are many monsters here. Raven looks back at the white dragon burning all the monsters with its blue flames. Beneath it lies a pile of corpses with flames that keep burning endlessly. He continues to speak, but that one dragon alone can handle most of them. Raven's face rarely relaxed like this. Now, he smiled faintly with relief, thinking to himself, the battle has been as gentle as a breeze so far. Thanks to this dragon, victory is almost in our hands. My final task is so easy. My luck is quite good. Suddenly, the white dragon no longer soared through the sky. Its solid feet landed on the ground. It landed right behind Eren, startling the young master momentarily. The white dragon lowered its head to look at Eren. The sudden descent of the white dragon made Raven worry. He asked Eren, "Young master, are you and the divine dragon injured?" Eren calmly replied briefly and concisely, "I'm fine. Don't worry." Raven did not ask anything further, only informing Eren, the battle will end immediately. That's it. Just as Raven finished his sentence, a flock of beast birds rushed in. They opened their sharp beaks and screeched loudly. They flew in a group, circling above them, causing the three to look towards them warily. Too familiar with the remnants seeking revenge, Raven frowned slightly and voiced his annoyance. Damn, those remnants. Noticing that the situation seemed off, Raven anxiously turned around and urged, "Young master, order the divine dragon to go." Eren and the white dragon stood there, looking at each other under the light shining down on them, without saying a word, simply exchanging glances. Eren and the white dragon had created a breathtaking scene. Eren slightly opened his mouth, but the sound he produced was unclear, causing Raven nearby to hear nothing. As if there was a resonance in their souls, the white dragon and Eren closed their eyes together, with no further actions. Their expressions now showed a sense of resignation that was hard to put into words. The flock of birds and beasts no longer hovered calmly above. They all swooped down simultaneously, aiming their claws at the white dragon. Raven's anxiety surged as he saw the large number of birds and beasts descending at once. He grimaced and stood in front of Eren, who was deep in thought behind him. He didn't notice this detail, only silently worrying. There are quite a few of them. Please deal with them, white dragon. At the same time, the white dragon raised its head, slowly opening its eyes to look at the beasts charging toward it. It seemed strangely calm, as if it had no intention of fighting back if attacked. In that moment of danger, the white dragon closed its blue eyes again, as if it was preparing to embrace the impending death. Without making white dragon wait long, the flock of birds and beasts quickly pounced on the delicious prey. Strangely, white dragon did not resist at all, standing still as if it were a statue, allowing the birds and beasts to tear at it before Raven's astonished eyes. He was shocked, unable to believe his own eyes. How could a noble divine dragon let itself be pounced on by those creatures? The birds and beasts continued to claw at white dragon, but it did not make a sound, truly enduring the pain inflicted by the creatures. After the initial shock, Raven quickly regained his composure. He shouted, questioning white dragon in a panic. "Why aren't you fighting back?" However, Eren, who accompanied white dragon, seemed to become numb after seeing it being attacked violently. Raven, panicking, grabbed Eren by the collar and shouted with an angry face, "Young master, what the hell are you doing?" Suddenly, an explosion occurred nearby, startling Raven. He turned around, panic flashing in his eyes, hesitantly saying, "What?" From the thick dust, all kinds of monsters rushed out, each with a fierce and savage appearance. Along with that, Raven's terrified voice echoed. Those monsters should have been dealt with nearly completely. Without having time to shake everything, Raven and Eren were rushed at by them, aiming to pounce on the two of them. The sharp claws lunged at them. Raven did not forget his mission. He stood in front of Eren to protect him while saying, "But I didn't think there would be so many left." The monsters quickly took control of the situation, taking turns exterminating humanity, constantly threatening their lives. At the same time, Raven was struggling to deal with them and protect Eren, but the difficulty was that Eren, like the White Dragon, had no intention of fleeing or fighting back, only accepting the wounds inflicted by the monsters. Raven suddenly recalled the image of the divine dragon along with the words, "A true dragon is the most powerful creature that ever existed. No matter what kind of monster it is not worthy of a dragon." Remembering a few minutes ago, he had been proud of the strength of this gigantic dragon. The battle up to this point had been as gentle as a breeze thanks to this dragon. Victory was almost in our grasp. My final mission is this easy. My luck is pretty good too. When the swarm of monsters suddenly charged out once again, Raven placed all his hopes on that dragon. "There are quite a few of them. Please deal with them, White Dragon." The confident words of others easily made him believe it, putting their current situation in a very difficult position. As long as our ally is the divine dragon, we will win. But now what? It is too late for Raven to regret. This is my fault for believing that lie and lowering my guard. How foolish I am. The consequence he now faces is a face drenched in fresh blood, flowing from his head down to his eyes, blurring his vision. Raven looked up at the dragon with its wings hanging down, soaked in fresh blood. It was unclear whether it was dead or not. All he knew was that the pristine, clean, majestic white dragon was gone. Now only a body pierced by giant spears remained, while countless monsters on the ground fought to tear apart the humans. Raven smiled a desperate smile. The strong smell of fresh blood filled his mouth, and his eyes lost focus. Noticing everything before him, Raven lowered his head, droplets of blood dripping to the ground, along with his voice. What a mess. Before long, the entire legion led by Raven was completely annihilated. Scattered on the ground were the unfortunate corpses from the monster assault. The short green goblins were grinning maliciously. In their hands were chipped knives or possibly sharp spears. 3 goblins quickly thrust down from above, aiming to attack Raven while he was slumped on the brutal battlefield. Though his breath was labored, Raven was still conscious. He quickly eliminated all the lurking goblins with a single blow. Despite being quite exhausted, he still pushed through, kneeling down, raising his sword with one hand. But no matter how strong he was, with such severe injuries, he could not hold on any longer. Raven staggered and knelt down, using his sword as a support. He felt his body running out of energy, bent over with fatigue, and murmured a curse. Damn it. Raven assessed his condition and silently thought, "I am quite exhausted now, and my wounds are deep. If I fall now, I will never be able to stand up again." Looking up, Raven tried to pull himself up, and in the sunlight, his weary face was revealed. Raven looked toward the white dragon not far away. It was covered in foul blood, its eyes tightly shut, unclear if it was dead. Raven and the white dragon were now merely the defeated. His feet stepped into the puddle of fresh blood flowing at the feet of the white dragon, slowly approaching with each cautious step. He lifted his head to look at the white dragon, its eyes shut tight. Despite being drenched in blood, it still exuded the noble essence characteristic of dragons. Raven called out to it in hopes that the white dragon was still alive. "White dragon, are you really dead?" No one answered his question, and an unsettling silence enveloped the scene. Before him were the white dragon and its master, both exhausted of strength. Eren was leaning against the white dragon, his whole body seemingly unconscious, starting to cough up a mouthful of blood. Raven's gaze was immediately drawn by the sound, glancing down at the young master in a pitiful state. Before Raven was Eren, covered in blood, indistinguishable whose it was anymore. He slunk completely against the white dragon, his eyes barely opening. Eren breathed laboriously as if he could only take a few more shallow breaths. Raven coldly observed Eren struggling to breathe. He simply remarked, "So you are still alive." Raven no longer cared about royal ceremonies or the dignity of this dying young master. He grabbed Eren by the collar, his voice sharp with demand. "Hey, before you die, answer me one thing." Raven used his little remaining calm to ask, why did the dragon stop attacking halfway? He couldn't help but reminisce about the scene back then. Raven recalled that the white dragon and Eren had exchanged something with each other. He asked, "Did you order the dragon to do something?" Receiving no response from Eren, he could only manage to glance up with his half-open eyes. That look made it impossible for Raven to maintain his composure. He gritted his teeth in frustration. Immediately, his tone turned irritable. He shouted at Eren disrespectfully, with all the exhaustion and anger. "We could have won if the dragon hadn't stopped attacking. Why did you do that? Answer me." Before Raven could get proper answer, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. A spear pierced through him. His heart felt like it was on fire, throbbing with pain. Raven could not withstand the pain and spat out a mouthful of blood. He collapsed to the ground, blood spilling from his chest. A cold draft rushed into his body right after the spear was pulled out. A voice came from behind him. Even if your heart is torn into pieces, you will not die. You truly live up to your name, the immortal Raven Vault. Baltainen, standing behind, grinned with delight after making his mocking remark. He was wearing dark brown armor, and he looked quite pleased as he observed Raven's state. Despite his severe injuries, Raven was still alive. The familiar voice, so nauseating that it made him furious, caused Raven to grimace and shout, "Baltaine!" The man laughed gleefully, spreading his arms wide in welcome to his victory, excitedly proclaiming, "Finally, it's over." He raised his axe with enthusiasm and ordered all troops attack. A group of soldiers rushed past him, brandishing their spears at the remaining monsters on the battlefield. The flag fluttered behind them, featuring the image of a lion with a crown atop its head. Truly, a royal emblem. Raven struggled to get up, one hand clutching the wound on his body, trying to direct his gaze towards Baltainen with an expression of confusion and pain. Royal troops, why is Baltainen leading them? Behind him, Eren was still gasping, exhausted, his face pressed against the ground. Baltainen chuckled, glancing at the astonished Raven. It was as if he could see through the questions in Raven's mind, his face carrying a smug expression as he spoke. "Don't be so surprised." The sharp axe blade was perfectly positioned against Eren's neck, and then he addressed Raven. From the very beginning, it has all been part of the plan. Baltainen stood arrogantly before Eren, who had lost all strength to resist. His gaze was fixed on Eren's neck, a sinister smile on his face. Baltainen excitedly continued, "But there are fools who refuse to acknowledge it." The scene unfolded completely before Raven's eyes. Even with the axe blade at his throat, Eren maintained an expression of calm as if nothing was happening, his face lifeless as if he accepted the imminent death. Seeing Eren's expression so serene as if accepting his fate, Baltainen laughed gleefully. In the next moment, hot blood splattered in an instant. Raven stood in shock as Eren's head flew into the air right before his horrified eyes. Raven watched Eren's head fall straight to the ground, his body stiffening, unsure how to react. Raven was struck silent by this scene. He could not believe that everything happening before him was real. Baltainen laughed with delight, turning his gaze towards Raven. How humiliating, but his death has been inevitable for a long time, and this too. As soon as he finished speaking, Baltainen kicked Raven, causing him to fall face down on the ground. Although not dead, he was in pain from his injuries and let out a soft groan. The severe wounds made Raven cough up blood. Seeing Raven in this state, Baltainen mockingly said, "So close, aren't you, Raven? Just a little more, and you would have your freedom." Baltainen grabbed Raven by his bleeding hand and pulled him up, continuing to mock him. "Pretty painful, isn't it? Your physique is quite remarkable." Baltainen's voice momentarily stunned Raven. "Your recovery is also quite unusual." Raven struggled to get up and looked up, unable to believe that the secret he had hidden for so many years had been discovered. To make matters worse, the one who discovered it was the worthless commander who only cared about women and drinking. He laboriously spoke, "So you know now." Baltainen replied nonchalantly as if it were a matter of course. "I just pretend not to recognize it for the sake of this day. But no matter how strong your recovery might be, if I cut your throat, is it possible that you will die too?" Baltainen grinned widely, relishing the chance to trample on someone who usually seemed indifferent to everything, coupled with the determination to reclaim his freedom, yet now appeared weak and devoid of resistance. His words carried a mocking tone. "What a waste it would be for you to die here without achieving what you call freedom." Raven clenched his teeth in anger. Each word from Baltainen truly struck at his pride. "For the sake of freedom and restoring my clan, I have fought for 10 years. But isn't it true that now is just like then?" Raven involuntarily recalled the terrifying night 10 years ago. Wasn't his current state similar to that time, being held down and receiving cruel remarks from others, just like the person he used to be? Thoughts raced through his mind. The weak and powerless are those who must endure, be humiliated, and die in a place like this, even though he was so close. Perhaps because a pierced heart is not a minor wound, when the physical pain tears alongside the mental anguish he must endure. The blood continuously drips down to the ground. Raven's face contorts in agony. Raven feels the voice resonate along with the cold blade on his neck. "Raven." Chuckling with delight, Baltainen wants to toy with Raven a little longer. So he reveals, "I will tell you a little secret. The truth is, the sky is peculiarly purple and pink." Baltainen's voice echoes, "The rebellion that the Velt family has borne for over a year. You're joining the Demon Legion and your death along with that Pendragon kid now. All of it was planned." Baltainen grits Raven's head, forcing him to look up at him. His face is stunned. Raven's eyes widen in shock as he hears the secret that Baltainen discloses. He stammers, "What?" Raven's face remains astonished. His terrified gaze looks up. Baltainen is annoyed to see Raven's eyes bulging. He kicks Raven disdainfully, causing him to fall back to the ground. Baltainen's voice resounds again. The only thing I didn't expect is that the dragon is so weak. Baltainen raised his axe high into the air, the light from the blade glinting. His face twisted into a sinister, savage grin, with his eyes flashing with a hint of murderous intent. But everything was part of someone else's plan. Baltainen aggressively brought the axe down, a satisfied smile spreading across his face. "Goodbye, little crow." Raven lay helplessly on the ground, his eyes wide in shock. But that look of agony was short-lived. Raven suddenly felt a jolt on his neck, and the world spun around him. His head was severed from his body, blood gushing from his neck along with the head that was no longer on his shoulders. The truth was that Ravenvault was dead. After an unknown amount of time, when the sounds of battle had ceased, returning silence to the wilderness, a breeze blew through the blood-soaked land, quickly reaching the enormous stone-like body of the dragon standing there. In the cold wind, the dragon's eyes opened. It turned out it was not dead yet, and it seemed to have witnessed everything. The white dragon calmly withdrew the spear that had been pierced through its neck, with not a single sound of pain escaping its wounded throat. Beneath its body lay two heads rolling on the ground. One belonged to the person who had made a pact with it, the other to the brave warrior it had known for a short time. The eyes of the dragon were filled with sorrow before shining brightly for a moment. It slowly lifted its head, and the voice of the dragon rang out, "All conditions have been met." Thick red blood covered the battlefield, rising as if it were alive. The blood pooled into a large puddle in the sky, creating a swirling river of dark red in the center of the heavens. The wings of the white dragon were gradually spreading wide, despite the bright red blood flowing from the deep wounds on its body. The white dragon soared into the air, spreading its wings majestically, its gaze fixed intently on the bodies of Eren and Raven below. The voice of the white dragon echoed throughout the wilderness. The blood of thousands of people, the blood of thousands of demons, the blood of the royal family, and the blood of the royal dragon. The white dragon made its final proclamation, and at the moment the sun meets the moon, I will fulfill my oath. The light emanating from its horn grew increasingly radiant and blinding, overpowering all natural light. The beam of light from the white dragon actively directed towards Eren's severed head, but it also touched Raven's head lying right beside it. In the blinding light, Eren's head gradually disappeared, and along with it, Raven's head began to vanish as well. The white dragon seemed oblivious to the simultaneous disappearance of Raven and Eren, and simply landed on the ground right where the two heads had vanished. The moment the moon rose high and the sun had completely set, leaving behind a gloomy night that served as a stage for the shimmering meteor shower, the white dragon raised its neck to look at the sky. It spoke with a voice while its body began to crack like a broken statue. "Everything now belongs to you, Dragon Raider." After expressing its final words, the white dragon lowered its long neck and calmly closed its eyes as pieces of its body shattered. "Everything now belongs to you, Dragon Raider." After uttering its last words, the white dragon closed its eyes, disregarding the falling stones like a stone statue. In an abyss of darkness as if submerged deep in a lightless ocean, Raven forced himself to open his eyes, his face contorted in pain. In a daze, he wondered, am I dead? No, this feeling of being torn apart from within. I still remember that sensation. Raven's whole body felt a continuous pain. In agony, he grimaced and gasped in the lightless water, the sensation reminding him of the time when his body could still recover, just like a rebirth. With a glimmer of hope still lingering, Raven silently wished, "So that means I still." Then everything stopped. In a half-awake, half-dream state, Raven vaguely opened his eyes. A faint, unfamiliar figure appeared, and he couldn't help but wonder, "Where am I?" Feeling a warmth glide over his hand, Raven dimly sensed someone was carefully touching his body. "What is that?" It seemed like something was on my wrist. Sensing the strangeness, Raven quickly sat up, but he couldn't clearly see who was in front of him. The maid, after a second of shock at the boy, who had suddenly sat up in bed, exclaimed in astonishment, "Young master." The maid, not knowing why, panicked and rushed out of the room, shouting loudly, "This is bad, someone, young master." Raven sat up in a daze, filled with doubt, repeating the maid's words, "Young master." When Raven's eyes had adjusted to the light, he was taken aback as he observed the decor in the room, silently thinking, "This is indeed a luxurious room. I've never seen this place before. Where in the world am I?" Before he could ponder further, hurried footsteps were approaching the room where Raven was lying. A middle-aged man burst through the door with a panicked expression. "Young master, you have finally woken up." In front of Raven were three entirely unfamiliar figures. A middle-aged woman with an elegant appearance, a middle-aged man in a black tailcoat with a meticulously groomed mustache, and a very young maid with a frantic look on her face, breathing heavily. The man with the mustache seemed to be the butler. He was emotional to the point of tears as he approached Raven. "Young master, you are awake now. You finally get it." The butler slowly reached out his hand towards Raven, as if afraid to startle him. Are you all right? Do you remember me? Raven was momentarily surprised by the form of address. He tried to open his mouth to speak. The one you are calling young master, is that me? The butler stared at Raven in shock, a bit panicked as he responded, yes, yes indeed. He seemed to fear that Raven would forget everything, so he tried to evoke Raven's memories by explaining clearly. This is the castle of the Pendragon family, Conrad. Then there was a confirmation. And you are the master of this place, Eren Pendragon. Raven frowned skeptically at the butler. He appeared stunned for a moment, seemingly unable to grasp the confusing words of the man. Suddenly thinking of something, his eyes widened in horror, with beads of sweat forming on his face, and he exclaimed in terror, What? I am Eren Pendragon. Raven bolted upright from the bed, gripping the small table beside the bed and trying to look at his reflection in the wash basin that the maid had left there. Raven stared stunned at the wash basin with wide eyes and a shocked expression. His body, his appearance had vanished, replaced by long, thin blonde hair, a pale face with blue eyes now taking the place of the dull gray eyes and scarred face. Staring at the boy in the wash basin, Raven couldn't believe it and exclaimed, What the hell happened? It can only be said that Raven had now become Eren. The maid was confused by Raven's stiff expression. She hesitantly asked, Master, is there ever a time when you don't remember what you look like? The butler, with the demeanor of someone experienced, stepped forward to reassure the flustered maid. Lindsay, the young master must be disoriented because he has just woken up, so go push him. This is normal since he has been in a coma for 3 years. Eren looked up at them with a doubtful expression, his mind filled with questions. 3 years. Has it really been 3 years since that battle? The more Eren thought about it, the harder it was to believe, but he was sure he had been beheaded and died before. Eren tried to piece the events together and reasoned, since I am almost immortal, why then, instead of being reborn, have I become a member of the Pendragon family? The image of two people who were originally unrelated to each other now had a connection that made Eren doubt. The door to the room suddenly swung open once more. A woman rushed into the room, her face showing a hint of panic. She seemed very worried as she called out, Eren, my son. The woman had shiny blonde hair just like Eren and radiated the noble demeanor of an aristocrat. She was breathing heavily as she approached Eren, her wide eyes filled with disbelief. You're awake? The butler and Lindsay both smiled joyfully at her, respectfully speaking. Madame Helene, the elderly lady who followed them, also smiled gently at the noblewoman. Eren, on the other hand, sat dazed on the bed, looking at Helene and silently wondering, who is this time? Ignoring the greetings from the two servants, Helene ran straight toward the older woman who had been silent since entering the room. Helene exclaimed excitedly, Eren, you've really woken up. Eren's eyes widened and his face went blank. The scene left him instantly speechless. Helene dashed past the elderly woman without any contact. Eren's gaze was chaotic as he raised his hand to point at her, panicking and intending to say, Who is she? At that moment, the elderly lady gestured to Eren by shaking her index finger, signaling him not to say anything. Helene threw her arms around Eren, who was still in shock from what he had just witnessed. Thank God, Eren, do you remember me? I am your mother. Eren, with a look of suspicion, was stunned by everything that was happening and exclaimed, I don't remember anything at all. What on earth happened? Is this a dream? Eren was still pondering. Could it be that this old lady... At that moment, the old woman waved her hand, signaling him to do something. A second later, she pointed in a certain direction. Eren curiously followed the direction of her finger and murmured. Outside, without noticing Helene standing in front of him, a flash of astonishment crossed Eren's eyes as he exclaimed, That's... A gigantic pure white wing was spread wide against the deep blue sky, adorned with bright, glittering pieces of golden armor. A magnificent white dragon, covered in gleaming gold and silver armor from head to tail, was perched atop a tower of the castle, its tail coiling around the building. It opened its eyes to look at Eren, and it was the white dragon which had betrayed Raven's trust in that battle. Eren showed clear signs of discomfort at the sight of the dragon that had caused him to be defeated before. An unconscious name escaped his lips, Soldrake. As if Soldrake had heard him call it, its eyes froze, even though the sound he made was only loud enough for him to hear. The dragon suddenly stretched its neck, and immediately after, a roar shook the sky erupted from the mouth of the white dragon. The powerful roar echoed throughout the castle. The pressure from the roar was so intense that it blew out the windows of Eren's room. Shards of glass shattered, creating an opportunity for the shockwave to crash into the room in the astonished gaze of everyone present. The dragon moved closer to Eren, getting nearer and nearer, until it became the only thing visible through the window. Its sharp claws gripped the window frame, and Eren, facing it, couldn't help but feel terrified, raising his hand to cover his face. His expression was perplexed at names surfaced in Eren's mind once again. Soldrake. Along with that was an overwhelming fear. Why do I know the name of the white dragon? No, after all, it had died with Eren before. The image he witnessed, the white dragon motionless with spears piercing through it, its pure white body stained with blood. The more Eren thought about it, the more confused he felt. Is it reborn? No. Then perhaps it is still alive in that state. Eren clenched his jaw uncomfortably. I can't understand anything that's happening anymore. A surprising voice shouted the dragon's name, Soldrake, along with a hand reaching out. Helene trembled as she stepped in front of the dragon and protect her son. She spread her arms wide and shouted, I will not let you harm my son ever again. Soldrake's eyes were fixed and unmoving on Helene as she suddenly rushed out. Helene's body shook with fear. She shut her eyes tightly, yet her expression remained resolute and unyielding, ready to risk her life to protect her son. An old woman unexpectedly moved in front of Helene, extending her hand towards Soldrake with a gentle smile. She stopped before Soldrake, reaching out to touch it as if wanting to caress it. Eren, worried for the old woman, leaned forward and shouted a warning, "Step back." Helene turned in shock to look at Eren, confused and exclaiming, "Eren." Seeing the old woman stroking the dragon, Eren felt it was strange that the dragon obediently closed its eyes, fully enjoying the affection. The old woman even turned back to Eren with a smile on her face and winked at him. Eren felt extremely bewildered to the point of being speechless, softly exclaiming, "What?" Helene, worried about her son, gently supported him with a caring tone, "Eren, what's wrong? It's very dangerous. You should sit down." Although Eren didn't push Helene away, his gaze was still one of astonishment and surprise due to the recent events. Eren couldn't help but look at the old woman with the thought, is that old lady the only one I can see? He saw the old woman and the dragon being calm. Presumably she was talking to the dragon, but he couldn't hear what she was saying. After receiving the old woman's caress, Soldrake calmed down, closing its eyes. Without hesitation, it slowly flapped its wings gently, leaving the window before Eren and Helene's gaze. The old woman calmly stood at the window frame and waved goodbye to it. Even as Soldrake's figure gradually faded, she remained there waving. The old woman turned back to look at Eren and gently nodded, her lips still curved into a gentle smile. Then she slowly vanished into the air like smoke. Eren witnessed all those peculiar scenes and couldn't help but feel skeptical. He struggled to suppress the heavy sigh within him. She has vanished. Seeing that Soldrake had finally left, Helene was able to breathe a sigh of relief. Her face was still dotted with beads of sweat from fear. The butler hurried over to support Helene, who was swaying as if about to fall. "Madam Helene, are you all right?" Helene gently touched her chest a few times and breathed slowly to stabilize her heartbeat. After a moment, she smiled and said to the butler, "I am fine, Melbourne." More importantly, Helene looked towards Eren, constantly worrying about her son, even though her face was still pale from shock. "Eren, are you all right?" Eren frowned slightly, biting his lip, lost in thought about this extravagant castle, the worried servants, and the name of the white dragon suddenly appearing in his mind. Eren and Raven had no familial ties, but now Raven had suddenly been reborn in this familiar yet strange body. It seems I have truly become Eren Pendragon. Not hearing Eren's response, Helene grew more anxious and hesitantly called his name. Eren. Raven, after a period of contemplation, finally decided to temporarily take on the role of Eren. He forced a smile and said to Helene, "It's okay, mother." Helene and the butler were able to breathe a sigh of relief upon hearing Eren's response. Eren got up from the bed and quietly observed everyone around him. He silently told himself, "Being confused now doesn't matter. I will gather information to put everything into a different perspective." Eren gathered his messy hair up, his strong back filled with the determination to clarify everything that was happening to him, then said to himself, "And since I'm not really Eren, I have to ensure I don't get exposed. Therefore, I must start gathering information first." The image of Raven's past appeared with a scarred face and a cold expression. He was determined to continuously sharpen his combat skills, along with his special regeneration ability, becoming a warrior that no one, not even any demon, could compare to. Then the image of the white dragon being stabbed by the spear, motionless right before his eyes, returned, conquering the demon legion on the plains in the final battle before I was set free. Both the minor duke and I fell victim to a trap and lost our lives in that battle, the bitterness rising in every word from Raven. At the very least, we should have, but I have awakened in the body of the young duke. Still, that past cannot be changed, and now Raven has been reborn in the body of Duke Eren, as if given another chance at life. Time has turned back 7 years before the battle began, but what Raven still cannot forget are the days when I bathed in a sea of blood and the stench of war floods back in waves. Yet now, Maid Lindsay is holding a silver spoon in her hand, putting on the airs of a kindergarten teacher wanting to feed Eren, young Duke. Eren's eyebrows instinctively furrow in displeasure. However, Lindsay does not give up because of Eren's discomfort. Though a bit flustered, she persistently brings the spoon to Eren, who is feeling quite upset and sweetly says, "She really sees you as a child in need of care. Now please say, ah." Eren thinks to himself, "I am being spoon-fed like a child." Looking at the caring demeanor of the maid in front of him prevents him from getting angry. Eren can only sigh and say, "I have been awake for several days now. I can at least feed myself." But Lindsay did not think so. She remained very persistent in urging him. "It can't be helped. After all, you still have to lie, still as the doctor advised." Lindsay was truly a dedicated and patient maid. She continued to plead with Eren, "So, please open your mouth." This maid named Lindsay was responsible for doing the boring chores every day before he fell into a coma. Eren's face contorted in distress as the spoon was brought close to his mouth. He silently lamented, "How can I be so blatantly overprotected?" Unable to resist, Eren eventually succumbed and opened his mouth, even though he felt extremely uncomfortable inside. He muttered to himself, "Since I became Eren, I have no choice but to obey them." However, thinking it was one thing on the other hand, he still quietly complied. In the end, Lindsay accomplished her task excellently. The meal, which was quite a struggle, had come to an end. After tidying up the dishes, Lindsay bowed her head to Eren. "Thank you, young Duke. While we wait for the medicine to be prepared, I will help you change." Eren reached back to grab his long hair, stepped lightly off the bed, and said to Lindsay, "No need, I can change myself." Eren calmly stood up, stepping away from the bed without noticing Lindsay's startled reaction behind him. He spoke, "I will go wash my face for a bit. Please bring my things and remember to bring a towel as well. It might take a little while, so it could be a hassle." Seeing the young Duke suddenly get out of bed made Lindsay so anxious that she started sweating. She hurried to block his way, stammering, "I, young Duke." Eren stopped in his tracks, startled, his long hair falling loose again. Lindsay held him back with both hands, her panicked expression making Eren instinctively feel fear as well. "You still can't walk. It could harm your body." Eren, despite his efforts, couldn't get used to such elaborate treatment and Lindsay's over-the-top reactions towards him. It was awkward and confusing for him. While Eren was still in shock, Lindsay flusteredly helped him walk to the bathroom. I will take care of your clothes and hair." Lindsay looked at Eren with tear-filled eyes as if she was about to cry. "Duke, you just need to rest." Eren, confused, could only reassure her. I understand, so calm down." Lindsay carefully arranged a small chair and said to Eren, "Then please wait here." After that, Lindsay hesitantly asked Eren for permission. "I will do it right now." Eren knew it was useless to resist, so he sighed and reluctantly nodded. I'm counting on you." In reality, was secretly complaining, "I want to be alone." Soon after, Lindsay had tied Eren's long hair neatly. He, feeling dejected, let her do whatever she wanted, internally lamenting, "I just arrived here." But even Eren's clothing was changed by Lindsay, which made him somewhat dissatisfied. In this world, everyone does everything for me. The more Eren thought about it, the more tired and irritated he became, his face darkening. He couldn't stand this. Attention was causing his stomach to ache terribly. Seeing Eren's frown, Lindsay anxiously asked him, "Duke, have you finished changing clothes? Is something wrong?" Eren tried to suppress his discomfort, forcing a very awkward smile, and then replied to Lindsay mechanically, "No, it's nothing." Right after that, Lindsay brought a full-length mirror for Eren to look into, then said, "Light, really light. So, is there anything else you need? Please tell me, young Duke." But Eren didn't even bother to glance at the mirror. He waved his hand and replied, "That's enough. I'll go lie down for a bit." Just when Eren thought he would get a moment of peace, a whispering voice rang out from behind the slowly opening door. "Brother." Eren jumped at this call. Stepping through the door were two beautiful young girls who resembled each other. Both had shiny blonde hair and emerald green eyes. The older one asked Eren, "How are you?" Accompanying her was a small girl holding a toy rabbit in her arms. The girl with long hair was Eren's older sister, named Eren, while the petite girl with short hair was Eren's younger sister, named Mia. As soon as Lindsay saw the two young ladies, she joyfully welcomed them, Lady Eren, Lady Maya. But on the contrary, Eren, who was already annoyed, became even more sullen. His whole body trembled with anger, silently irritated. "Why is my time being disturbed over and over again like this?" As soon as she entered the room, Mia quickly ran straight towards Eren. Eren yelled out to stop her sister. "Maya, wait!" But the little girl ignored her sister's call and dashed straight to hug Eren's leg, catching him by surprise. Mia looked up at Eren with innocent eyes, tightly hugging his leg. This adorable sight was truly heartwarming. Eren was uncomfortable with the unexpected hug, but he couldn't get angry because she was his sister. He could only force a strained smile at the little girl. Eren anxiously walked up beside Eren, shyly speaking, "I'm sorry, big brother. Have you been able to walk normally yet?" Eren replied awkwardly, "Ah, if he can walk, That's fine. While Eren was holding Mia in his lap on the bed, Lindsay quickly got a chair for Eren. Miss Eren, please take a seat. Before sitting down, Eren gently nodded at Lindsay. Thank you, Lindsay. Seeing Eren sigh tiredly, Eren's worried face asked, Brother, are we bothering you? Mia heard this and immediately looked up at Eren. Eren really wanted to kick them out to be alone, but Mia's curious gaze and Eren's genuine concern made him swallow the words he was about to say. Eren forced a smile and replied, No, it's fine. Upon hearing this, Eren smiled brightly. Great, we were so happy to hear that you woke up. By the way, all the flowers in the garden have bloomed. When you can leave the room, let's go see them together. Eren continued to cheerfully share stories. The corn you planted has bloomed too. You still remember, right? Before you fell into a coma? Listening to Eren's stories, Eren felt discomfort wash over him. Here we go again. Eren shot a cold glance at Eren. Every time he indicated that he had lost his memory, this younger sister of his would keep rambling about the past. But thanks to her, he could learn a heap of information from her. Eren felt uneasy after hearing her stories. He realized just how much of a clown the past Eren Pendragon had been. From what she said, he could tell what kind of person this Eren was. Eren Pendragon, instead of learning how to wield a sword, was immersed in various books and drawing, a person who preferred nature over fighting. But that was enough. However, Eren was a coward, always locking himself in his room and not communicating with others. For Raven, that was somewhat acceptable, because he too sometimes did not want to interact with people. Those reasons made Raven realize why both Eren's swordsmanship and combat skills were incredibly poor. Quickly, rumors about him spread everywhere. The Duke's family became a laughingstock in the eyes of the people. Eren couldn't help but feel sorry when he thought of the fate of this family in his previous life. In his heart was Maya's innocent face, and he frowned slightly. No wonder this Pendragon family was declining. Eren looked at the hands of his current body, pale and smooth, with no calluses. He reminded himself, but now time has turned back, and I have become him. This body is about 17 years old, younger than 10 years ago when I encountered him in battle. Slowly recalling the words of the servant, according to what they said in the castle, he had been in a coma since he was 14 and woke up 3 years later. Eren pondered. There must be some reason that forced me to take over his body while he was in a coma. Although he was going through an unimaginable experience, Eren calmly regained his composure. He thought, no, the reason why isn't important. What matters is that I'm still alive and have returned to 7 years ago. Eren's face suddenly turned cold with a faint smile. I have a chance to do everything over again. Eren remembered the day he was still Raven, with dark hair and a scarred face. That was the day he was captured by the demon army and lost all honor of his family. I have the opportunity to seize what I couldn't have before. Eren's eyes became sharp as he thought about his family's vengeance, the things he had been unable to achieve. Let's start with what Baltai said before. Eren recalled Baltai's words before taking his head. The shame that your clan must endure is due to your stubbornness 10 years ago. Your being sent to the demon court and your death today are all connected. It has all been arranged. Raven remembered those words vividly, determined to understand what he had said before. Eren's lips curled into a smile as he immersed himself in his own thoughts. In the name of Eren Pendragon and Ravenvault, I will fight once more. While Eren was lost in his world, Eren was also busy telling her story. Suddenly, Eren stopped and rushed over to interrupt Eren's thoughts. Can you hear me, big brother? Startled by Eren's voice, Eren replied, Sorry, please continue. Mia, sitting below, was eagerly looking up at her siblings chatting. Eren beamed and continued, All right, Lady Luna will come here to see you, big brother. Upon hearing the unfamiliar name, Eren curiously asked, Wait, who is Lady Luna? Eren immediately expressed self-blame for not paying attention to her brother who had lost his memory. Oh, I'm sorry, your memory is still. Eren quickly explained to Eren, Lady Luna is a knight of the Pendragon family and the adopted daughter of Count Sirad. Eren spoke with an excited tone, seemingly admiring and supporting their engagement. She is your fiancée. Hearing this shocking news, Eren's already pale face grew even paler. His expression froze in shock. After processing the information, the shock faded and surprise took over, cold sweat trickling down his cheeks. In the meantime, a group of people on horseback had arrived on the road leading to Conrad Castle. War horses and soldiers advanced, bearing the flag adorned with the crowned red wolf. The knights riding horses were fully equipped with armor and weapons. Trailing behind them was a luxurious carriage. A knight wearing a blue cloak over his seamless armor approached the carriage and reported, We will soon arrive at Conrad Castle within the Duchy, so please wait a little longer. Lady Luna, the silver-haired girl with regal beauty and a cold expression, created a fairy tale atmosphere inside the carriage. But she only looked at the knight with a scornful glance and didn't bother to respond at all. The accompanying horsemen continued to move, escorting the carriage to safety. The blue-clad knight couldn't find any other words after the girl's arrogant disdain, so he detached himself from the carriage again. A moment later, he approached the carriage and spoke in what seemed like a very refined tone. "Miss Luna, after 3 years, you finally get to see your fiancé again." This knight tried to strike up a conversation with Luna in a rather awkward manner. He attempted to engage the owner of the carriage with a tone he thought was refined. "Could you tell this humble Breeden how you feel right now?" He was the chief knight of the Sacred Count's family, Joseph Breeden. One look at his infatuated eyes reveals that he was pursuing Luna. After a while, Luna finally opened her delicate mouth in harmony with her high nose and let out a slight sigh. Having shown indifference all this time, Luna finally turned to Breeden and asked, "Why should I tell someone like you anything?" Even as Luna's gaze fixed on Breeden, it was still a look of contempt. "Don't bother me. Focus on your own business. This is the Sacred Count's family, Luna Rayrod." After disdainfully glancing at Breeden, Luna turned her gaze back to the inside of the carriage, her face showing signs of exasperation. She sighed softly, unpleasant memories of Eren surfacing in her mind. Eren Pendragon, a weak and pitiable person whose very gender is unclear. The image of the young boy anxiously hiding behind a curtain on the ground conjured up boring shades of color. Even when we visit, he will hide in the darkness fearfully, making even a conversation impossible. My engagement to someone like him is merely for the benefit of the family. However, today, all of that will end. My father has decided to annul this engagement. The relationship between the two houses has fractured. The power of the Pendragon Duke has significantly declined over the past few years. There is no longer any reason to continue this engagement. Although from the very beginning, I never chose someone as weak as him to be my partner. To be honest, I feel relieved that my father asked me to annul the engagement. While Luna closed her eyes, quietly reflecting on this meaningless marriage, Breeden was not giving up. He continued to chat beside the carriage. Although our purpose here is to announce the annulment of the engagement, I still wonder if young Master Eren has matured. Luna was continually disturbed, and she furrowed her brows in annoyance. After a sideways glance, she coldly replied, "That's none of your business. I will be the one to speak, so if you just stay there and don't provoke their night." Suddenly, Breeden burst into laughter, a mocking grin on his face. He had no manners, considering himself superior, and arrogantly taunted, "They don't treat the people like the knights of House Pendragon do. And even if that kid, no, young Master Eren awakens, the glories of the past cannot be restored." He interrupted his speech, deliberately emphasizing the latter part to ridicule Eren right in front of Luna. Young Master Eren once failed to form a contract with a dragon. The image of the white dragon coldly turning its back on Eren, gravely injured and falling in a pool of blood on the cold ground. Breeden arrogantly predicted, "I'm sure House Pendragon can only go down from here." Breeden suddenly changed his attitude, proudly thumping his chest after having mocked the young master of the Pendragon family. "However, if it were me," he cheerfully boasted, "I will bring glory to the Sacred House more than the Pendragons ever could." A Pendragon without a dragon by their side, just me alone is more than enough. Luna could not hold back her disdain for his actions and words, cutting him off. "Sir Breeden." Luna glanced at Breeden while holding her hand over her nose, as if he were exuding a disgusting, foul odor. She said, "That's unpleasant, step back." Despite Luna's harsh words, Breeden calmly bowed his head. He appeared compliant and respectfully replied, "Oh, please forgive my rudeness, milady." Luna had nothing more to say to Breeden. Inside, a deep feeling of contempt arose. I wonder if either the Sarod or Pendragon houses have anyone worthy of respect. Then she sighed softly. Bored, Luna rested her head against the carriage window and muttered, "I dislike both the weak and the boastful." After sensing Luna's attitude, Breeden seemed to understand and stopped his chatter. Soon after, the caravan reached the top of the hill, and they began to see a magnificent white castle with countless towering spires appearing at the end of the road. Not long after, Luna and Breeden entered the Duchy of Pendragon. The hall of Conrad Castle was greeted by members of the Duke's family. Luna politely bowed her head, performing the greeting ritual elegantly. "Greetings to everyone from the Duchy of Pendragon." She then raised her eyes to the members of the Pendragon family with a gentle and holy face. It has been a while. Her gentle demeanor made it so that no one in the family would recognize the purpose of her visit if she didn't say it out loud. Eren stared intently at his fiancée, his face slightly wrinkling with discomfort and his lips curling up in annoyance. As soon as Eren finished her greeting, she rushed to embrace Luna, happily calling out, "Sister Luna, you still look as beautiful as ever. You look amazing." Luna smiled and gently hugged the girl. "Eren, it has been a while, hasn't it?" Helene placed her hand on Eren's shoulder and gently pushed him towards Luna. "Luna, thank you for coming all this way. Everyone has been waiting for you. Come on, Eren, escort the young lady to her room." Eren forced a half smile as he stepped forward under his mother's urging. Seeing this, the corner of Luna's mouth slightly curled up. So pitiful. At this age, without a mother by his side, he still can't greet you properly. Eren stared at Luna and felt uneasy, his face cold and expressionless. Eren suppressed his discomfort and moved closer to Luna. It's been a long time. I'll take you to your room. Follow me. For a moment, Luna was slightly surprised when Eren spoke. You. She vaguely sensed an unusual aura emanating from him. Before he began to lead the way, Eren turned back to look at Luna once more. Oh, is it fine to leave the night in a separate room? Seeing Luna standing there, staring blankly at him, Eren impatiently urged, Hey, are you listening? Luna quickly regained her composure and followed Eren, waving her hand dismissively. Please excuse me. It's fine to keep the night in a separate room. Eren's eyes grew slightly dimmer, and he couldn't help but wonder. I heard Eren say she is a quiet and calm person. While guiding Luna, Eren's face looked displeased. He couldn't help but sigh. Having such an attitude towards a fiancé after not seeing each other for 3 years, I guess this is what people call a political marriage truly worthless. Lindsay quickly opened the door to a room and invited the two in. Young master, Miss Sarah, please come in. Luna maintained her politeness before entering the room, saying to Eren, May I? Then Lindsay approached Eren and asked quietly, Young master, should I prepare tea? Eren slightly tilted his head to look at her. Humph, it's up to you. Lindsay immediately nodded in response, understood. Meanwhile, Luna stood behind, looking at Eren with suspicion. Turning to face Luna, seeing her standing dumbfounded behind him, Eren turned back and said in a cold tone, Don't stand there. Why don't you find a spot you like and sit down? Luna was stunned by the change in the young Duke Pendragon. She was almost frozen for a moment, questioning, What the heck is going on? Luna pondered, remembering previous encounters with Eren, when he always had to have his mother by his side, bowing his head and not daring to look up, unable to meet the eyes of the person he was talking to. Then she looked at Eren, who was comfortably engaging with Lindsay. Luna hesitated to express her thoughts. You have changed quite a lot, haven't you? Hearing the sudden question, Eren appeared confused. Humph. Luna quickly brushed that aside and continued. I've heard that you don't remember your past, but do you remember me? Eren calmly sat down in a chair, crossing his legs, and answered dismissively. I don't remember anything before I woke up. Forgive me. Luna slowly sat down across from Eren, her gaze unable to leave him. This meant that he had lost all of his memories and now had an entirely different personality. However, even so, Eren was not comfortable with the current situation. He turned his head away, his eyes not looking at Luna, inadvertently revealing a perfect profile. He sighed softly. In Luna's eyes, the image of him now was that of a magnificent man, completely incomparable to the person he was before. Luna's expression changed. Sometimes even she didn't recognize herself. Her eyes sparkled, her cheeks slightly flushed, and she thought to herself, with the current version of him, perhaps the state of the Pendragon family will. Her train of thought was abruptly interrupted, because Eren's gaze was now coldly fixed on Luna with a clear attitude of wanting to send her away. As Luna silently observed Eren, he quietly scrutinized her in return. His eyes were even colder than ice. In this situation, I don't have a clear grasp of the Pendragon family's situation and the surrounding clans. I'm not sure what will happen if I cause trouble with the Sarad family, but this woman seems to be hiding something ever since we met. The corners of Eren's mouth slightly curled up with an interesting thought emerging in his mind. Well, I guess I should ask a few baiting questions. Acting on that thought, Eren calmly said to Luna, It seems that I am different from the Eren before. Both my sister and the maids have mentioned this. His face bore a light smile, yet it was still quite seductive. This may not be fair to you, but if my current self is not suitable for you, perhaps we should reconsider with the Count. Hearing words that mirrored her initial intentions for coming here, Luna's reaction unexpectedly became intense. She abruptly interjected Eren with a sudden eagerness. No. Realizing that she had acted impulsively, Luna quickly withdrew her hand, looking embarrassed. I apologize. She awkwardly said those words under Eren's gaze. Luna fidgeted, tightly gripping her dress to prevent herself from acting rashly. What am I doing? The cancellation of the engagement was decided by my father. Isn't my presence here to inform him about that? No matter how much the person before her might change, the situation of the Pendragon family would not be restored. Luna slightly furrowed her brow as she looked directly into Eren's cold face. That's why. After a moment of thought, Luna bit her lip, reminding herself, that's why if I don't quickly tell him. Just as Luna was about to speak about the engagement cancellation as planned, Lindsay shyly walked in, causing Luna to swallow the words she intended to say. Young master. Lindsay awkwardly peered into the room. I'm sorry for coming back in the middle. Eren immediately turned his gaze towards the maid. Lindsay, is there something wrong? Lindsay stammered an explanation. Ah yes, it's a message from the Duchess. She asked the young master to come to the drawing room with Miss Sarah immediately. Eren frowned slightly at this unexpected turn of events and voiced his annoyance. Why? Lindsay hesitated and replied somewhat awkwardly, the knight came here with the young lady. It caused a bit of a commotion. Lindsay hesitated, choosing her words carefully to avoid upsetting Luna, who was present. Upon hearing this, Luna's eyes widened in surprise. Eren fixed his gaze on Luna as though seeking an explanation, which made her jump in his cold stare. Luna bit her lip anxiously. She didn't even dare look directly at Eren, silently resenting the timing, thinking, this is so bad. I had warned them to be discreet. Eren noticed the flustered expression on Luna's face and seized the opportunity, standing up abruptly, leaning on the table, and bluntly asking, you had that look on your face as if you're hiding a secret from the very beginning. You didn't come here with some kind of scheme, did you? Luna felt flustered by Eren's straightforward attitude and replied, no, that's not. Just return the result. Inside her, she was trying to calm down. We could talk about it now if you'd like. How on earth did Luna's eyes meet his cold expression and aura once again, making it harder for her to think clearly, even though she was supposed to hate him? Eren, frustrated by Luna's lack of response, turned sharply away. The irritation was evident on his face, causing his brows to furrow slightly. Eren leisurely left his seat and said to Luna, we will listen to you later. For now, we need to stop your knight first. Luna stood up to follow Eren, her face showing confusion. With curiosity bubbling inside her, what could have caused this person to change so drastically? Anyway, I need to go stop Breeden first. Carrying that curiosity and anxiety, she followed Eren, walking coldly with a very obedient expression. Yes, let's go. Inside the hall were Breeden, the steward, along with Helene seated on the throne. Meanwhile, the steward of Castle Conrad couldn't contain his frustration and spoke up. Annul the engagement? Is that really what Count Sirud wants, Mr. Breeden? Breeden replied in a mocking tone. That's right, we are here to inform the Duke, Eren. Helene sat high above, looking down at Breeden, while biting her lip in anger. Her fury boiling over, Helene confronted Breeden directly, canceling the engagement with the Pendragon household. Are you prepared to take responsibility for the issues that arise from that? Breeden's arrogant attitude and playful demeanor remained unchanged in the face of the Duchess Pendragon. Of course. Breeden snickered and spoke about the conditions. The Count said he would not only hand over the gold and crystal mines at the border of the territory, but also 2 sawmills in the Brainyard Forest to the Pendragon family and transfer ownership. The steward and Lady Helene were both stunned, their eyes wide open upon hearing those exchange terms. Faced with such an enticing proposal, the steward began to mutter in doubt, What? What? Lady Helene clenched her hand tightly on the throne. Breeden leaned in, pretending to be respectful, but his smile and tone were full of derision. It seems the servants and knights are not pleased with this. Would you like me to make a suggestion? The veins on the butler's face started to bulge with Breeden's disdainful arrogance. He was truly furious, and the Duchess could not hide the anger that showed on her face. She clenched her jaw to prevent herself from acting impulsively in her anger. They both shared the same thought. How far is this guy going to insult our family? Helene calmly thought it through. Pendragon was struggling with financial issues, but our family's pride could not bear to accept this. After making her decision, Helene looked down and spoke firmly. She declared, I want to reject that offer. Breeden still kept his head down, but looked up at Helene with a mocking demeanor and a provocative tone. Are you sure? This could be your family's last chance to regain your status. Seeing Breeden's arrogant demeanor, Helene could hardly contain her anger any longer. She gritted her teeth and questioned, Why you? Just then, a voice echoed throughout the room. Wait! Everyone's gaze immediately turned to where Eren's voice had come from. Their eyes widened, unable to hide their astonishment. The knights simultaneously bowed their heads in respect for the heir of the Pendragon family. Eren, with his radiant demeanor and cold expression, walked inside. The tension and heavy atmosphere in the room dissipated the moment he appeared. Dressed in a white outfit from head to toe, Eren surprised everyone with his aura. Although a bit thin, the contours of his face were elegant yet solid. No one could mistake the presence that emanated from those blue eyes. Around him was a powerful aura that seemed to overshadow everything. Even the beautiful and radiant Luna felt overshadowed when standing next to Eren. Helene's face, which had been filled with worry and anger, now brightened up. She quickly changed her attitude and warmly welcomed her son, Eren. Even the butler rejoiced, his aged face lighting up with a broad smile. Took Eren. Breeden didn't even bother to turn and pay his respects to Eren. He wore a sly smile and thought, it seems that Brat finally arrived. Pay close attention, Miss Luna. I will prove that I am worth more than that punk. Eren calmly sat down in the chair next to Helene, crossing his legs. Just as he settled into his seat, Breeden sneered, Took Eren. Breeden lifted his face to the sky arrogantly, greeting Eren as if they were equals. He didn't even bother about properly. It's been a while. How have you been? Eren had no interest in conversing with someone as mouthy as him. The initial negative impression meant Eren's eyes only reluctantly glanced at him. His gaze clearly showed disdain. The corner of his mouth curled up, expressing extreme contempt. Who are you? Breeden's arrogant face suddenly stiffened like stone. He looked up at the person above him with confusion, unsure if he was dreaming or just stupidly exclaimed, "Huh?" Eren sighed wearily, showing frustration as he leaned back in his chair and waved his hand, continuing, "I don't remember anything after waking up, so I have no idea who you are." Hearing that, Breeden immediately dropped the worry in his heart. He even let out a slight mocking laugh. Has he lost his memory? Well, even if his personality has changed, he's still an idiot. I'll make it happen at all costs. The arrogant smile returned to Breeden's face as he bowed slightly. I sympathize with you. I am the chief knight of the Serid Count family. Get lost. Before Breeden could finish his sentence, a blunt voice dismissed him. Once again, a stiff and awkward expression appeared on Breeden's face. He exclaimed in surprise, "Eh?" Seeing Breeden standing like a statue, Eren waved his hand dismissively. I'm not interested in you. You're just a knight, and I want you to disappear. Breeden, unaware of his own position, loudly retorted with a hint of reproach. What? Tittle Duke, isn't it extremely rude to say that to a knight commander like me? Helene and Eren from the throne shot Breeden a pair of cold, piercing eyes filled with murderous intent. The intimidating aura seemed to radiate from them, completely overpowering Breeden. Eren's voice turned icy. I think you are the rude one for swimming all the way to our castle. I'll repeat, get out of my sight, knight. Eren suddenly glared with a threatening tone. Don't make me say it again. Breeden felt shaken by Eren's chilling voice. He was overcome with fear, his face paling, and his fingers involuntarily curling in terror. Breeden did not dare to utter another word, his whole body trembling before Eren's overwhelming presence. Luna watched as her commander acted like a fool, unaware of his own limitations, and could only sigh in exasperation. Eren suddenly spoke, directing his words toward Luna. So, Luna was taken aback, raising her head at his call. Eren smirked and said suggestively to Luna, It seems you are still debating the annulment of the engagement. Eren beckoned for Luna to step forward and spoke disdainfully to Breeden. Get out, Silard. I want to talk to the person involved. Luna felt flustered by the unexpected events. She stepped forward with a worried expression, her mind racing with thoughts. I can't believe things have turned out this way. What should I do? Eren calmly addressed Luna with the demeanor of someone in control. As far as I know, you want to annul the engagement in exchange for the gold mine and the crystals, along with 2 somnals, right? Luna immediately replied, yes. Eren casually waved his hand and said, then the debt is settled. Luna, the steward, and even Helene all stared wide-eyed at Eren. Luna was mostly stunned because she could not imagine the outcome turning out like this. What shocked Helene the most was Eren's way of speaking. She glanced at her son with a look of astonishment. Done with your debt? Where did the boy learn that word? After recovering from his shock, the butler became more anxious. He exclaimed to Eren, Little Duke, you do realize this is a matter for the Pendragons, right? I think you should think more before making a decision. Eren stood up, turned his gaze elsewhere, and declared to everyone, to restore Pendragon's power, a lot needs to be done. Eren in his new body, with a face showing determination, said, now is not the time to panic just because of a broken engagement. Eren looked at Luna once more. Moreover, no matter what we do, the Count will not change his mind. Am I right, Luna Serid? Luna was flustered by Eren's question. She stammered as if trying to change the situation. I. Luna inadvertently clasped her dress tightly in confusion. I should have just said that I can't marry someone like you. I don't want to acknowledge that, but at this moment, I've already fallen for him. Luna's thoughts caused her face to blush momentarily. Eren smirked slightly and said sarcastically, It seems you still find it hard to respond. Eren smiled wryly and bluntly added, Well, you don't need to answer as your opinion regarding the Serid family doesn't matter. We will accept the Serid family's proposal to annul the engagement. Luna's eyes widened in shock. She looked up, wanting to say something, but then hesitated. After making the decision, Eren turned to Helene. Duchess, are you okay with this? Helene was still surprised by Eren's decision and his behavior, which was contrary to his previous character. However, she quickly regained her composure and sighed in relief. It's fine. Helene looked at Eren with a gaze full of faith. You are the head of the Pendragon family, so I trust you. Eren gently nodded and smiled in response to the Duchess's support, a rare expression since he arrived here. Eren firmly declared, I, as the head of the Pendragon family, hereby announce that the engagement between Eren Pendragon and Luna Serid is officially annulled. Hearing that resounding declaration, everyone had different expressions. Luna looked regretful, while Breeden was angry. The butler sighed in relief with a gentle smile, and Lady Helene smiled in satisfaction. After everything was settled, Eren walked down the hallway with a look of disdain. Following behind was Lindsay, who showed a worried expression as she struggled to keep up with him. Eren's discomfort did not wane. He thought to himself, "Oh my, not only am I suffering from a headache due to so many things to consider, but I'm also being forced to deal with trivial matters like the engagement." As Eren walked and pondered, although asking Eren about the financial situation seemed to be the right thing to do. If we could obtain so many resources, there's no reason to refuse to break off the engagement. The crystal mine would be a source of magical energy and somewhat useful. Whether high-level mages would come here would still depend on those mines. Lost in thought, he passed by a familiar picture. Eren suddenly stopped when he walked past a huge portrait. He stared intently at that very familiar painting. After a moment of reflection, Eren realized that the woman in the portrait was the old lady who had appeared on the very first day he woke up in this body. Eren's eyes reflected curiosity and a desire to know about the mysterious old woman. He pointed at the portrait and asked Lindsay, his gaze still fixed on the painting. "Lindsay, who is this?" Lindsay also looked at the portrait and replied, "Oh, this is the sister of Sir Eren Pendragon, the father of the Duke, Atia Pendragon." Both Lindsay and Eren looked up at the portrait with reverent eyes. The painting accurately depicted the gentle and kind beauty that Eren had seen back then. He involuntarily murmured the old woman's name softly, Atia Pendragon. As Eren's eyes remained intently on the portrait, a whisper, as if carried away by the wind, echoed in his ear, "I heard you call my name, young Pendragon." Eren jumped and turned his head immediately, but Lindsay continued to gaze at the portrait without any reaction. It seemed that only Eren could hear that voice. An elderly woman stood in front of Eren, bathed in the shimmering sunlight filtering through the stained glass, shining like a fairy. Atia smiled as she turned and spoke gently. "I have something I wish to ask you," she suggested with a gentle smile and kind eyes that Eren found impossible to refuse. "Shall we chat a bit?" Eren returned to his room and closed the door. He hesitated, turning towards Atia, who was sitting in a nearby chair. Eren spoke up. "So, Lady Atia, what brings you to me?" Atia smiled gently and said to Eren, "You see, I am a ghost. Being called by name is a prerequisite for speaking with the living, you know." Atia playfully winked at Eren, clearly enjoying herself. She was Eren's aunt, Atia Pendragon, a ghost. Eren reluctantly let out an "ah," as if he understood. His face showed clear disbelief, unable to hide his bewildered frown. Eren thought to himself, "I have faced demons for 10 years, but this is the first time talking to a ghost. Ever since I took over this body, one bizarre thing after another has come my way. I guess worrying is useless." Seeing that Eren had no more questions, Atia continued with a friendly smile, "All right, let me get straight to the point." Suddenly, Aisha's expression changed completely. She looked at Eren with a gaze that seemed to pierce through everything, her voice turning serious. Who are you?" She pointed at Eren with a firm voice. "You are not the real Eren Pendragon, are you?" Eren suddenly froze. He didn't expect to be discovered so quickly. Seeing Eren's expression, Aisha burst out laughing. She laughed even more brightly than before. "I apologize for speaking in such a threatening tone. I've always wanted to try that, but for me, this is not a surprise at all." Aisha calmly reminded him of what happened the day Eren woke up. "At that time, Soldrake told me that you were not the real Eren." Hearing this, Eren gradually lowered his guard and comfortably leaned back in his chair. He said, "So that's how it is. So you can communicate with dragons too? Do you know exactly what happened?" Aisha gently smiled and replied, "No, I don't know anything. So would you mind telling me in detail how you became Eren?" Eren frowned slightly, pondering. She is a spirit, and since I am the only one who can see her, it should be fine. After a moment of thought, he cautiously opened his mouth. "All right." He sat up, no longer leaning against the chair, and with a serious demeanor looked into Aisha's eyes, beginning to recount. "I don't know if you believe me, but I will tell you everything." Immediately after, Eren recounted the main details of the story. In July of 321, according to the royal calendar, I and Eren were killed while on a mission in the Lobtain steppe. Mentioning this brought back uncomfortable memories for Eren. He sighed softly and continued. "And then, when I woke up, I was like this. As for why I returned to the past and was reborn as Eren, I am still trying to find out more." Aisha's face still showed some concern after hearing the incredible story, but she nodded after a moment of contemplation. "I understand now. I have a general grasp of it." Eren was very surprised by Aisha's acceptance with no doubt at all. "Do you believe me?" Aisha rested her chin and thought for a moment and then said, "Whether I believe or not cannot change the fact that you are here. And since Soldrake has discovered that you are not Eren, I guess the story must be true. However, the Eren that you claim to have protected in the Lobtane steppe is likely an imposter. Eren raised his eyebrows in slight surprise after her words. What? Asha began to explain the heir of the Pendragon family has made a pact with Soldrake for many generations. The image of the mighty Soldrake was watching Mrs. Achia as she reminisced. Then she gently asked, have you ever heard about the importance of the tomb opening ceremony? She continued to explain the tomb of the Pendragon family is not just a resting place for the souls of the ancestors. The family's wealth, the power from the blessings of the ancestors, the spirit of Soldrake, along with the magical tower that holds the family's secrets, which you can learn, are all kept there. Mrs. Achia went on. In other words, it is the source of power that brings prosperity to the Pendragon family. If the tomb is opened, the family's wealth will be safely protected. But if it is closed, that wealth will diminish. Therefore, opening the tomb is absolutely essential. Mrs. Achia concluded her story. That is precisely why the tomb door can only be inherited by someone from the Pendragon family who has overcome the immense power of Soldrake and succeeded in making a pact with it. There is only one opportunity to make that pact. If one fails, they will have to pass it on to the next generation. A very difficult task. Achia calmly continued. Even Klein, the notoriously strong one, and his predecessor, Gord, had a hard time signing the covenant. Achia's voice remained steady. That is also the reason why Eren, the weakest in the history of the Pendragon family, was completely defeated by Soldrake, and it is also the reason why Soldrake fell into a coma. Achia seriously pointed and offered her advice. The chance for the heir defeated by Soldrake to wake up is very low. That noble white dragon only follows the one who has conquered its power. Therefore, it is impossible for Eren to go to the battlefield with Soldrake and beat you. Eren was stunned, eyes wide at what Achia just said. Suddenly, Achia leaned in closer to him with an eager expression. But that's not the main point. Eren didn't understand why Achia suddenly seemed to be cheerful while everything was in chaos. He wondered as he looked at her finger waving in front of him. What do you mean? Achia's smile grew deeper and her eyes sparkled as her finger slowly pointed directly at Eren. The most important thing right now is that Eren Pendragon has woken up with a body completely possessed by another soul. Eren felt a bit uncomfortable with Achia getting too close, silently thinking. Too close, but still calmly asking, what do you mean? Achia cheerfully replied, the body belongs to Eren, but the soul does not. If it's another soul, you will have a chance to sign a new contract. Achia seemed very excited, guiding him. So, Ravenvault, there aren't enough warriors in Pendragon right now. But Mrs. Achia provided instructions. Go to the Ancona Forest, the dwelling place of ferocious monsters. The purple moonlight shone over the dim, misty forest. Mrs. Achia's voice echoed excitedly. Defeat each monster that appears one by one. Even now, the image of Eren slaying those monsters has already formed in her imagination. In Achia's imagination, Eren valiantly wielded his sword and thrust it powerfully into the mouth of the beast. Achia's voice echoed, until you reach the tomb, the deepest place in the forest. Achia continued with something that surprised Eren even more. Show the guardian of the tomb, Soldrake, your strength and forge a pact with it. The image of Eren battling alongside the white dragon, easily taming it, appeared heroically in Achia's mind. Enough with the lengthy talk, she quickly concluded, pointing her finger directly at the astonished Eren sitting across from her. Then the true heir of the Pendragon family. Please open the door to our family tomb. After making her suggestion, she smiled and asked Eren in a somewhat provocative tone, what do you think? Do you have what it requires? Eren slightly smirked at his aunt, who was provocatively challenging him. It seemed she knew how to ignite others' fighting spirit. Eren confidently replied to Achia with a smile. All right then. Eren's confidence and radiant demeanor surprised Achia a bit. Although she knew he was different from Eren, this confidence and decisiveness still overwhelmed her. Eren happily continued, from what I've heard, opening the tomb only benefits everyone, and since I'm already accustomed to killing demons, I have no reason to refuse. Eren felt more at ease, leaning back in his chair as he had at the beginning. The more he spoke, the more excited he became. Furthermore, regaining the influence of this family is a very good thing. I have my own goals, so whenever there is an opportunity, I will seize it. Achia smiled with satisfaction, thinking that this was someone who decisively did not hesitate to use any means necessary to achieve their goals. Ha! I'm intrigued. After a moment of silence, silently assessing the young man before her, she calmly nodded. Of course, I have nothing to complain about when it comes to you successfully reclaiming the glory of the Pendragon house. That is my only wish. I promise I will not obstruct your path to achieving your goals. Eren smiled back at her. Ah, thank you very much. Relaxation did not last long as Eren furrowed his brow in contemplation and sighed. Now that my next step has been decided, the next thing is to take command of the subordinate families. Huh! Because of Eren's past, my honor is very chaotic and my military command is extremely disordered. Asia smiled brightly, encouraging him. I understand, right? Even though they always support this family even after Eren fell, there are still those who will humiliate this family and its weak leader. Such dull, outdated thoughts. Remember to greet the heads of the subordinate families and let them know you are the true master of this castle. Eren flinched slightly at the sincere encouragement. Suddenly, he felt a sense of reverence for Asia. Her desires were not too different from his own. After a moment's consideration, he said, yes, mastering the subordinate families and preparing to open the tomb. Let's see, about half a month. With a fierce flame of determination burning within him, he stood up with a self-satisfied smile on his face. I will do my best to finish before half a month. Recalling the excitement he felt while hunting monsters, Eren would exuberantly leap forward and without hesitation strike a powerful blow toward the giant crocodile with its sharp fangs wide open, destroying it in an instant. Regardless of the size of the enemy, their numbers, or their habits and movements when facing the enormous ferocious wolf, Eren could easily take its head. After many fierce battles, Eren always reminded himself, don't rely on your allies, try to solve everything on your own. Despite facing various monsters from eagles, crocodiles to wolves, Eren never backed down. One person, one sword, eliminating all obstacles. Every time he recalled the tragic scene from before, Eren was determined to defeat everything to solve things himself, so that there would be no outcome like that again. Eren's eyes flashed with determination as he delivered another strike to the monsters, ending his train of thought. At that moment, Eren was practicing his swordsmanship, and the maid Lindsay couldn't help but admire him. She eagerly ran over to Eren, respectfully offering him clothes and praising him. Wow, that's amazing, young master. Here's the outfit for you to change into. Eren replied briefly and reached out to take the clothes. He stripped off his shirt right there, causing Lindsay to blush and hurriedly turn away. But Eren was unbothered by this and remained deep in thought. When I woke up in the body of Eren, this body was too weak to wield a sword. He lifted his arm and continued to ponder. After practicing for a few days, I regained the original state I had while hunting demons. The recovery ability and combat skills were also inherited. It's truly wonderful to be alive again. Suddenly, Mark Killian's voice rang out. Oh my, young master, are you practicing your swordsmanship? Eren, having just finished putting on his shirt, turned to look at him, and Lindsay followed his gaze. They saw Mark Killian in armor, a sword sheathed at his side, bowing respectfully. Then Mark Killian stood tall, clenched his fist, and raised it to his chest as if preparing to read an oath, his face filled with happiness as he closed his eyes and said, finally, you have decided to change your mind. I am so happy that I could go out and kill a lion myself. Mark Killian then placed both hands on his hips, winked, and said to Eren, however, if you're going to practice, you should let me know. I won't come rushing in just as you wake up. Mark Killian is the chief knight of House Pendragon. Eren approached with his sword, patted Mark Killian on the shoulder, gave a faint smile, and said, Killian, hold back. I will prepare for a stage even bigger than this. Mark Killian didn't understand what Eren was saying and turned to look at him in confusion. In the main hall of Conrad Castle, all the knights were kneeling on 1v waiting for orders. Only Mark Killian and Melbourne in the front row were standing. Eren stood on a high platform, one hand resting on his sword in a commanding pose, and he spoke firmly. All right, everyone is here. I have an important announcement to make. When everyone had fallen silent to listen, he clearly stated each word. I want to open the tomb. As soon as he said this, everyone in the grand hall was shocked, their mouths agape and their eyes wide with disbelief. It was Killian who spoke to Eren. Young master, to do that, you need to secure the Ancona forest on the other side of the gate. Who will follow your orders, but you have only been training for a few days. Is that really okay? Eren rubbed his chin, exhaled, and replied, don't mind me. Tell me the situation near the gate. Killian crossed his arms and shook his head, saying, it's terrible, sir. Since the beginning of the year, not only have monsters been rampant everywhere, but even bandits are making trouble. Each town has formed its own guard, but it's just a matter of time before the gate collapses and the monsters and bandits surge in. Eren said seriously, no matter how dangerous the area is, we cannot just ignore it. Melbourne and Killian both shook their heads in unison. Melbourne quickly raised his hand to advise, please don't be hasty, young master. After restoring the family using a crystal mine received earlier from the Sigurd family, I think it would be better if you let Killian proceed with the plan. Eren sighed and interrupted Melbourne. First, we don't have enough manpower to protect and exploit the crystal mine. In the end, we have no choice but to open Rhinan once again. Eren firmly struck his sword down, resolutely stating, we don't have much time. Who will leave in 15 days? He looked down and commanded, the expedition will begin in 15 days. As soon as Eren finished speaking, Killian joyfully and happily said, I will not accept any opposition regarding my role as the commander of this campaign. The atmosphere around suddenly stiffened. Eren silently looked at Killian. Suddenly, he broke into a smile and asked, What did you say? Then he slowly took steps closer to Killian's group, questioning as he walked. So I cannot take command, right? There's always someone to oppose me, huh? Well, let's have a fight then, Killian. Killian stammered in response, I prepared a large area because you wanted to teach me again, but is this all right, sir? The expedition cannot succeed if the commander only knows how to read and draw. Eren smiled faintly, resting his sword on his shoulder, then said softly, You ought to thank me too much if you are a knight. Eren did not finish his sentence, but immediately drew his sword and charged straight at Killian as if to attack. Killian reacted quickly, raising his sword to block. The sound of friction when the two blades clashed was deafening. Killian gritted his teeth to bear the pressure of the sword, feeling panic inside. It's too heavy. Eren seemed to read his thoughts and coldly said, Speak with your sword. Killian clicked his tongue and then swung his sword fiercely, breaking free from Eren's attack. Eren immediately dodged to the side, both of them extremely agile in response to each other's assault. Eren rotated the sword in his hand, holding it in a most convenient way to get ready for battle. He jumped, the sword flashing with a cold, sharp light. Eren focused his strength into the sword, then swung it powerfully towards Killian, executing a series of fluid movements. Killian was staggered by the power of this attack, almost falling. His hand holding the sword trembled and lost strength. He gritted his teeth, trying to hold on. Very quickly, Killian regained his momentum, raised his sword to block Eren's attack, and shouted loudly, no longer caring about the master-servant hierarchy. No way a kid who has never trained and has been unconscious for years can defeat me. Eren and Killian were engaged in a vigorous struggle. Killian had great agility and could dodge all of Eren's attacks, but Eren remained unfazed, always wearing a faint smile on his lips. After a while of grappling, Killian seemed to be wearing out, sweating profusely, unable to control his heavy breathing. Eren, on the other hand, showed no signs of fatigue, with not a single drop of sweat on his face, still calmly smiling. Suddenly, he retracted his sword and sheathed it. He unexpectedly charged at Killian, thrusting the hilt of his sword directly into his heart. Even though it was just a thrust with the hilt, Eren's powerful inner strength was enough to overwhelm the exhausted Killian. Killian choked continuously, coughing violently, sweat streaming down his face. In an instant, he could no longer withstand it and collapsed, unconscious. Eren slammed his sword into the ground, his hands in his pockets, proudly accepting his victory. Naldan and all the knights present in a great hall were utterly astonished, unable to believe their eyes as the young master who had never trained and had been in a coma for years could defeat the chief knight they had always respected. Everyone looked at Eren with new eyes. Eren tossed his sword to the ground, creating a loud noise. The crowd, still in shock, jumped at the sound. Under the admiring gaze of the onlookers, Eren turned his head and said, I'll say it again. Eren's expression became colder than ever. He coldly enunciated each word. We will depart in 15 days. I will form a pact with the White Dragon and open the tomb. If anyone opposes, feel free to leave. Everyone who had witnessed the previous duel was shaken. No one objected. They all knelt and collectively exclaimed, No, we shall obey your command. At this moment, in the Conrad Castle, Lumina was sipping her tea, looking very graceful. Suddenly, a hurrying voice broke the atmosphere. Miss Luna. Joseph Breeden was seen panting at the door as if he had just run there with great effort. He asked Luna, Even though this is within Pendragon territory, why do you say you will go with Duke Eren on the expedition? Not waiting for Luna to respond, he placed a hand on his chest and continued, This is too much. No matter how Duke Eren changes, it won't help this expedition at all. Why not return to the territory with the escort of the deity? Luna exhaled and said to Joseph Breeden, I hate you for this, always being rebellious and looking down on others. Perhaps you don't understand, so I will explain my reasons to you. She looked straight into Joseph Breeden's eyes and continued, Pendragon is a relative of my family. He is one of the 5 ducal families of the Empire and one of the 2 families that inherit the bloodline of the Emperor. Even if this situation is too much to bear, understanding the gains and losses of the Sacred family and grasping the situation of the Pendragon family is necessary. Luna closed her eyes, no longer looking at Joseph Breeden, and concluded, Returning to the territory now is not a wise decision. Joseph Breeden listened in silence as Luna said, When Duke Eren sets out, I will accompany him. Then Joseph Breeden bent down carefully to speak to Luna. I understand, but you can accompany him to the Bellin Gate. Please return to Ridge with me afterward. Luna agreed with him. All right, I will. Luna picked up her teacup, lost in thought. If the Duke becomes different from before and succeeds in the opening ceremony, the Pendragon family will regain its former glory. Suddenly, Luna blushed, thinking, I must witness how good he can become. Seeing Luna like this, Joseph Breeden gritted his teeth, resenting Eren in his heart. Damn it, that kid. After embarrassing me, also makes the lady go crazy over him. He bit his finger, harboring malevolent resentment. Just wait and see, I'll show you how scary the world out there can be. The Pendragon Knight squad had gathered fully. Eren stepped confidently on his steel shoes toward the formation. He wore white armor adorned with golden floral patterns. In the center of his chest was a set emerald embedded. On his back, he wore a red cape that flowed in the wind, exuding an air of nobility and authority. Suddenly, a voice called out, Eren. Eren turned to look. Helene was running from a distance to hug her son tightly, her eyes filled with tears as she sobbed. Come back safely, my son. Promise me, you must return safely, all right? Remember, safety comes first. Eren felt awkward from the unexpected embrace, stammering shyly, Mother, mother. Helene continued to hold Eren tightly, weeping, unable to let go. Eren sighed helplessly and gently comforted Helene. Mom, I will definitely return after conquering both the White Dragon and the tomb. Helene, tears streaming down her face, choked out, You must, my son. At that moment, Eren raised his head and looked ahead. Eren, holding Mia, was also trembling, biting her lip to hold back her tears. Mia, being held in her arms, was crying out loud. Eren gently reassured them. Everything will be all right. I will come back. Seeing her son like this, Helene also felt happiness and smiled despite her tears. Lindsay brought the horse over and respectfully said to Eren, Young master, it's time. Eren turned around and replied, All right, let's set off. Eren confidently climbed onto the horse, gripping the reins tightly. The black horse, clad in armor, neighed powerfully, inspiring the morale of everyone around. Eren turned the horse around, facing the Pendragon cavalry with great authority. Mark Killian had completely submitted to Eren, his expression very serious. Lindsay appeared tense as it was her first time on the battlefield. Joseph Breeden, harboring resentment towards Eren, looked very displeased, frowning and gritting his teeth. Luna was always focused on Eren, biting her lip in concern. Melon approached Eren with a tray holding a sword, bowing respectfully, as he said, Young master, I present to you the Pendragon heirloom sword, Widow's Grief. Eren extended his hand to receive the heirloom sword. Holding the sword with both hands in front of him, he sincerely closed his eyes and silently made a vow. Eren recalled the image of himself bound in chains, falsely accused in his past life, fueling his determination. I will restore the reputation of the Pendragon family with this battle. I will fulfill the long-held aspiration of the Vault family and rid myself of the humiliation of being labeled a traitor of the Empire. I will fight for myself once again. Thinking like that, Eren narrowed his eyes, the fire of his overflowing will hidden within his pupils. He drew his sword from its sheath, raised it high, pointing the tip of the blade towards the sky. The warhorse also lifted its front legs, perfectly mirroring his actions. Eren let out a heroic shout. Let's set out, all for the glory of House Pendragon. The army immediately raised the family banner high and shouted the motto, then urged their horses on the road. In the evening, in a private room surrounded by iron fences of the Duke, Eren sat at his desk, speaking to Mark Killian and Joseph Breeden. I want to add more soldiers for the raid on the bandits tomorrow. Mark Killian respectfully replied, Unfortunately, my lord, this would reduce the number of commanders and soldiers guarding the castle, wouldn't it? Immediately, Joseph Breeden raised his hand to his chest, feigning sincerity as he said, My lord, a few days ago, our family received support of soldiers from Castle Conrad. Therefore, this time, I wish to repay your kindness with all my heart. I will request to send more soldiers from House Sarah to support you. Eren and Killian both turned to look at him. Eren was silent, lost in thought. It was hard to trust the words of this unreliable person. I don't know what you're planning, but it's up to you. The Sarah family still has value to exploit, so it should be fine. Thinking this, Eren spoke to Joseph Breeden. However, there will be some who oppose leaving the family's territory to come here at your request. Killian suddenly spoke up. I think it will be fine. Killian crossed his arms and said nonchalantly, And I think now is not the time to worry about those things. Moreover, the leader of the bandits, Del Jeffrey, managed to entice more than 20 soldiers to desert at that time, and by now, that number is likely to be greater than we anticipated. So it would be best to reinforce our side. Eren looked at Killian and gave a faint smile. He turned to Killian and said, I appreciate your judgment. Now tell me more about Del Jeffrey. Killian gestured with his hand, beginning to share his insights. Of course, Joffrey is a knight who possesses excellent swordsmanship. Killian thought about Del Jeffrey's actions. Filled with rage, he said, However, he seemed to be an arrogant man. He boldly demanded to elevate his title along with 3 territories next to Belen after your power had diminished. The Duchess refused his request, and thus he fled with a few soldiers of his clan while still holding the rank of general. Killian, suppressing his anger, continued, We found him trying to dominate the area near the south of Norton Village like a bandit. Eren stroked his chin and thought, he is quite clever. Instead of seizing the gate and the castle, expanding his influence by dominating the surrounding villages is much easier to accomplish. If I were him, I would do the same. Mark Killian continued talking about the situation outside. Currently, women and children are being slaughtered with no signs of stopping. The south of Norton is in a state of panic. They may soon begin to occupy the gate if we do not negotiate with them immediately. Eren agreed with Killian. Yeah, you're right. Eren pointed to the map on the table and said, I will plan the conquest and observe. At this point, Eren paused for a moment. Eren pointed at Killian and said, I will delegate command to you. Killian was slightly surprised by this order from Eren, then slowly replied, yes. Eren interlocked his fingers, explaining to Killian, they are all soldiers who followed your command during the time I was absent. Those soldiers will probably listen to you more than to me, someone who has never interacted with them. So I am assigning that task to you. Killian, one hand on his hip and the other patting his chest proudly, said, yes, you can leave it to me. Eren said, all right then, Sir Killian will take command. Killian couldn't hide his satisfied smile and immediately nodded. Eren continued to speak to Joseph Breeden beside him, and Sir Breeden will act as a cavalry liaison. Joseph Breeden also happily placed his hand on his chest and sincerely nodded. After assigning the tasks, Eren told the two, we will depart tomorrow morning. You both should rest early. Killian and Breeden replied in unison, understood. After Joseph Breeden had left first, just as Killian was about to leave, Eren said, all right, Sir Killian. Killian turned back, confused. At this moment, Eren stood up, leaned against the table, and sincerely said to Killian, you see, I want to apologize for what happened last time. Killian recalled the scene of his failure that day silent, but in just a moment, Killian was tearing up, seemingly very moved by Eren's actions. He knelt down, raised his hand to his chest in a gesture of respect towards Eren, and sincerely said, there's no need, young master. I haven't broken any bones, so it's not a problem at all. Thank you for your concern. Eren looked at Killian and smiled, saying, I understand now, so I'm counting on you. Around the south in Norton Village, the bodies struck by arrows lay scattered on the ground, creating a devastating scene. At that moment, the sound of horses suddenly resonated. Horses galloped by, trampling on people. Even those who were still alive were crushed, crying out in agony. This ruthless band of horses was the army of Del Jeffrey. He sat on his horse, pointing his sword to the sky, and said arrogantly, ha 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 ha, take everything valuable, brothers. Just kill any women and children in the way. Del Jeffrey approached a woman, tightly holding her small child in her arms. With tear-filled eyes, the woman pleaded desperately, I beg you, at the very least, spare this child. He showed no concern and arrogantly said, what? Hey, this land is completely my territory. Do you know what happens when you don't obey your ruler? Saying this, he dismounted from his horse, pointing his sword at the poor woman kneeling on the cold ground. Furrowing his brow, he spoke to the woman, people like you with nothing to offer have no value at all. The woman, trembling in fear, closed her eyes tightly, hugging her child to her chest, sobbing and pleading, please, sir, stop and spare our lives. Yet the cruel Del Jeffrey remained unmoved. He mercilessly sent the poor woman to the other world with a single stroke to her forehead. The woman departed without closing her eyes. The little girl, still enveloped in her mother's embrace, was now left alone. Desperate, she wailed and shook her mother awake. Mommy! The call for her mother was heart-wrenching, but the child's mother could no longer return. The little girl, frightened, looked up at the man in front of her. He let out a cold laugh and stepped closer to the poor girl. He rested his sword on his shoulder, grinning wickedly, and said, I hate kids who can't keep their mouths shut all day long. Farewell. The little girl heard these words and, frightened, began to cry uncontrollably, but she could not touch the heart of the cruel man. He swung his sword towards the poor little girl. Accompanied by the sorrowful scream of the child was the moment a lovely angel departed from this world. May it be that in the world beyond, the girl and her mother will have a happier life. At that moment, Del Jeffrey's subordinate came and patted him on the shoulder, sighing and shaking his head in frustration, saying, oh, brother, there's nothing left to take here. He smiled and replied, I think it's time for us to seize the fortress. He raised his finger to his mouth, laughing wickedly as he spoke of his ambitions. And next is the Conrad Castle. I will kill that useless man in front of Lady Aline. Lady Aline will ultimately be mine. He gritted his teeth and said something before bursting into laughter. The Pendragon family becoming our slaves is only a matter of time. Hey, ha ha ha. At that very moment, Eren and Killian were also sitting on horseback, looking towards the already desolate village of Norton. Eren frowned as he took in the scene. This land has been devastated so terribly that the people here cannot possibly survive in such circumstances. He turned to Killian beside him and asked, Sir Killian, are all the areas outside the fortress in this state? Killian responded, about 70% of the territory is like this. However, there are still a few villagers who have managed to endure and are still alive. But seeking help from the fortress is unlikely since they have to flee from both the bandits and the wandering monsters around. Ultimately, they will all have to die. Eren pondered seriously. He initially thought that opening the tomb would be his top priority, but perhaps he must address the development of these territories first. 70% is in a state of ruin. If we can rebuild this city to a reasonable level, then by rough calculations, the population would be around 10,000. After all, the Pendragon territory is quite large. Suddenly, a rustling of wings and growling from a branch startled Eren's troops. 2 black feathers dropped before Eren and Killian. Eren raised an arm and commanded, "All troops take your positions." He silently thought, is it a winged monster? Suddenly, a large monster in the shape of an eagle rushed towards Eren. It opened its mouth and let out an incredibly deafening scream. Eren showed no fear. Instead, there was a hint of excitement on his face. He took his sword-drawing stance and said to the monster, "Harpy, you showed up just in time." Eren swung his sword forward, causing the charging monster to scream in fear and retreat. Eren turned his horse sideways and spoke to the soldiers. 5 archers with strong arms stepped forward. Immediately, 5 bowmen stepped forward, positioning themselves in front of Eren's horse, looking towards the monster and ready for battle. Eren smiled and ordered the 5 archers, "Capture it alive for me." As soon as Eren finished speaking, the 5 archers in front simultaneously shot arrows at the monster's wings. The monster was hit by the arrows, howling in pain. Injured in its wings, it staggered as if about to fall. After struggling for a while, the monster could no longer resist and fell to the ground. Eren dismounted his horse and looked at the monster lying groaning on the ground. Satisfied, he said, "Good, it finally fell down." Killian frowned and said, "It's just as expected. The demons have retreated from the village." Eren replied, "Yes." Suddenly, a sound of animal cries came from the nearby bushes, along with rustling noises. Eren and Killian turned their heads simultaneously to look. As anticipated, 3 goblins with yellow eyes jumped out from the bushes. Each of them had at least 1 horn on their heads, and each was holding a small sword. They growled and charged toward Eren's army. Killian anxiously shouted to Eren, "Goblins, young master." But before Killian could finish his sentence, Eren sheathed his sword. The 3 goblins were moaning. One was injured in the leg, and another was wounded in the shoulder. Killian was astonished by Eren's extraordinary skills and silently admired. He is really fast. The harpy monster and the 3 goblins from earlier were now lined up neatly to one side, fearfully watching Eren as he approached step by step. Killian extended his hands from behind and advised Eren, "Young master, we have already dealt with these demons. We should leave." Eren turned and smiled, then said one word, "No." Then Eren continued, "Who will make them submit to us?" Eren's words left all the soldiers present astonished, murmuring in confusion. What did he just say? Killian was bewildered, but still replied, "Yes." Eren looked at the largest goblin with 3 horns on its head, seriously saying, "These goblins have extremely good eyesight." He then turned to the harpy monster beside him and added, "And the speed of that female bird out there is something we can take advantage of. I have thought about the useful things they can bring us." Killian stammered his doubt, but I have never heard of anyone talking about turning demons into their servants." Eren turned to answer Killian, "I have seen that in battles from the past. No, I read it in a book." Eren smiled confidently, reassuring everyone. "Regardless of whether they are demons or whatever, I will still take advantage of them as long as they are useful. It's fine. So you all just need to step back and watch." Eren boldly stepped in front of the 3-horned goblin. He put one hand on his hip and the other on his sword, bending down to ask the goblin, "What are you doing outside the forest so close to the village?" The terrified fairy replied, "There are many things in this forest that are scarier than Khazad, from wolves to wraiths, from eagles to orcs, and there's even a white dragon. Everything we hunt here has already been taken by them." Eren smiled and said, "So you are Khazad. That's good. I understand your situation now." Then Eren pointed his sword at the harpy monster and asked, "Next will be you. Have you ever eaten human flesh?" The monster panicked and quickly denied, No, I haven't eaten any humans. I only eat sheep and some snakes." Eren maintained his faint smile and asked it again, "Is that so?" Eren remembered his past life on the brutal battlefield, where he had witnessed this kind of monster gnawing on the corpses of the dead. At that time, he approached, numb, looking at the disgusting scene before him, not knowing what he was thinking inside. The monster, mouth full of human flesh, also turned its head to look at him blankly. Eren snapped out of his recollection and said to the monster in front of him, "Although the eagle I knew before had eaten human flesh, I believe you this time." The terrified monster let out a cry and responded, "Thank you, sir." But suddenly, Eren stabbed his sword into the trunk of the tree right above the monster's head. It and the nearby goblin jumped in shock and cried out. Eren casually said, however, Eren grabbed the frightened monster by the neck and dangerously threatened them. From now on, I want you to obey me. I am the master of this land, Duke Pendragon. If you dare to defy me or intend to escape, I will throw you to the white dragon to be eaten. The nearby goblins were terrified and quickly huddled together. The monster and the three-horned goblin embraced each other and respectfully said to Eren, the dragons are truly terrifying. Kazel and Tada will always obey your commands. Eren, satisfied, placed his hands on his hips and said, sounds good. Then Tada, Kazel, it's time to get to work. Take us to the village to the south via the shortest route. This scene left the soldiers behind Eren astonished, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Goblin Kazel ran to the front, fearfully pointing and saying, I understand, Kazel knows the way, follow me. Killian stepped beside Eren, continuously praising, you truly turned them into your attendants, that's amazing. To have such imagination and quick wit, we must learn from you. Eren smiled in agreement with Killian. You are right. He tilted his head and continued, what I want is for those troublesome nobles to start competing with each other. The elf Kazel rode on the back of the eagle Tada, leading Eren's army ahead. Kazel enthusiastically pointed and said, we are almost at the southern village. Thanks to the shortcut Kazel showed us, we're almost there, yeah. Eren turned to Killian and said, all right, Killian, stay here. Brian and I will attack the abandoned monastery with a small group of soldiers. Later, I will send you a signal, so come when I do. Killian nodded and said, I understand. Luna rode behind, worriedly thinking, since the young Duke Eren is always being watched and has never been to battle before, I wonder if he will be all right. Joseph Breeden walked ahead, reaching out, turning his head to smile at Luna. Let's go, miss. I will take care of your safety, so just follow me. Eren turned around and shouted a command to the army. Now the whole army follow me. Killian drew his sword and spurred his horse to dash forward quickly. He commanded the goblin and the eagle. Kazel, Tada, Ariel, your mission is to scout. Go. The goblin and the eagle shouted in unison. Understood. Then the evil carrying the goblin soared high into the sky. At that moment, in the small village, Del Jeffrey's gang was escorting weak, innocent villagers toward a large house. Del Jeffrey held a rope with one hand, pulling a woman along, while his other hand grabbed a boy by the hair, dragging him along the ground. The woman pleaded with him. I beg you, please don't beat the boy anymore. He shouted at the woman. Shut up. You should be grateful to still have your pathetic life. He pulled the woman strongly forward while continuing to grip the boy's hair tightly, causing him to cry out in pain. The boy was dragged along, constantly struggling and crying. Mommy! Del Joffrey gritted his teeth in anger, raising his fist to strike. Brat, can you shut your mouth? The woman behind shouted in fear. Stop it! This only made Del Joffrey angrier, but before he could bring his fist down on the boy's face, his arm was severed, flying into the air, blood splattering everywhere. He seemed to be dazed, not understanding what was happening, raising his now useless arm, bewildered. At that moment, Eren had ridden closer and pointed the still bleeding sword at him. He was shocked, falling to the ground, astonished to the point of being speechless. Eren looked down at him as if he were an ant, his face full of disdain and contempt. Del Joffrey was overwhelmed by this aura, crawling backward, pointing at Eren, stuttering. You are. He suspiciously exclaimed loudly, clearly pronouncing Eren's name, Eren Pendragon. Contrary to his bewildered expression, the woman next to him was overjoyed, shedding tears. The Duke. Eren dismounted and approached Del Joffrey, resting his sword on his shoulder, hands on his hips, coldly saying to him, I finally beat you, beast. Eren squinted at him and smiled derisively. He frowned, drenched in sweat, continuously retreating backward. He took a step back and Eren stepped forward until he could no longer retreat. He pointed at Eren, stammering without forming a complete sentence. You. His gang members then moved closer. Del Joffrey, feeling emboldened, stated, Why is that useless brat from the Pendragon family here? As soon as he finished speaking, a cold flash of light struck his cheek. He glanced over only to see that Eren had made a swift cut across his face. He gritted his teeth but could do nothing. Eren glared, his words icy and piercing, threatening to swallow the listener whole. Who gave you the right to open that filthy mouth? Del Joffrey was horrified, clamping his mouth shut, wide-eyed as he looked at the person before him, unable to believe that this was the brat he had always looked down upon. He hurriedly turned to run, shouting loudly, You guys! He raised his hand and yelled at the people standing in front of the villa gate. Go on, kill him. The group, hearing the command, immediately wore excited expressions and rushed forward. Eren did not hesitate to step back despite seeing the enemy numbers. In his right hand, he held the Pendragon family's sword, while in his left, he raised his own sword to his mouth. Eren expertly unsheathed the sword with his mouth, the movement incredibly smooth. The moment the sword sheath fell to the ground was when Eren charged forward. Del Joffrey, seeing him rush forward with two swords in hand, could not help but feel astonished, his face filled with confusion and shock.